What I'd like right now is for all you inner city sweat hogs, keep the noise down. It's time for Wrestling Tonight, live from the No Sale Studios. I am the ace of the tavern, Acefield Retro, joined as always by my partner in wrestling news, the one bad Chad. What's going on, dude?
Another day, some great wrestling news, a great wrestling weekend. Can't wait to get into it. We got some good big three topics. It's going to be a fun show.
Hell yeah, and I'm very happy to be on here. We got three big stories that you mentioned, and we might as well get into the first one because this has been on the tip of everybody's tongue since it ended last night, and I thought it was a well-paced show last night. We'll get into all the details with it. But AEW Revolution, man, this is something that you and I have been talking about off air. The feels like
let's do it real quick before you fire in. Let's do it proper. Let's throw the bumper in just for all the marks, all of our loyalists. Let's throw it in. Throw the bumper in. There we go.
There we go. A little anxious, little, hesitant to just.
You're chomping at the bit, man. We're chomping at the bit to get into this.
There's our boy Tony Khan. He's got that awesome hair. The mad scientist, as we heard you guys talk about on the debate. He put on quite the show last night at Revolution, and like I mentioned before, felt like it was a well-paced night. I know a lot of the criticism of AEW pay-per-views have been the length, and it was that as well. But this was well-paced. Didn't have too many booking holes, I would say, and we're going to get into all the fallout. But I had a great night of watching wrestling. I felt like it's hard to not be pleased with what you got for your $50.
Dude, this was one of the more entertaining pay-per-views AEW's put on in the existence of their company. I mean, this has got to be a top fiver in my opinion. Like, I thought every match delivered. Even the ones that didn't have all of these stips attached to them, like Ricky Starks and Jericho, like I felt like every match was a good match. Coming out of it, it left you on such a high, and the pacing of it was incredible. Like the show started at 8 p.m. and I think 11:30, 11:40, it's over. You get a little under 4 hours worth of entertainment. I thought it was well worth the $50.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the biggest piece of this was, as you mentioned, the pacing and how the card was structured. So if we go to the opening match of the night, and you guys can get the breakdown from the AEW wrap up last night, you can probably listen to. We're not going to go into full depth about all the matches and the ramifications, but I thought Jericho and Ricky Starks was a really good match to start with because of just the two guys to set the tone. And the crowd in San Francisco needed no prompting. I mean, the Cow Palace, obviously they're like across the street at the Chase Center, so it's not the same building, but a lot of the same fans that a lot of times are painfully aware of their wrestling significance, but that played in their favor right now because they were off to the races. Like, they were just as much of a star of the show, and they made themselves heard throughout every match. And Ricky Starks and Jericho, they were aided by this, and I feel like the match, again, set the tone for the night. They gave it an appropriate amount of time. The right person went over, which is always important.
Yep.
And we went off to the next match after that. But I mean, what were your thoughts on Ricky Starks and Jericho?
I liked it. I thought it was a great way to kick the show off. Jericho loves being in that opener spot. Like, if he's not in the main event, he loves opening the show. I think they properly built this feud. These guys have been going at it for a while. This was a pretty monumental moment for Ricky Starks because you're in there with arguably one of the biggest people he's ever had a feud with. And we're blowing it off. Maybe, I don't know. Does he go on to something next? Does Jericho come out and this continues on? Who knows? I have a feeling it's on to the next one for Ricky Starks, but great showing for the kid. Gets his first win on a pay-per-view. What he said in the scrum afterwards, his first win on a pay-per-view. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's wild to think about because it feels like he's been on such a run and the momentum has been, crazy. Like, I go back to the Winter is Coming match against MJF where he probably should have had that Dynamite Diamond Ring 1. They combined it with that match for the championship. So that kind of set him back a bit because the momentum felt like he needed to come out of the feud of winning that tournament and coming out with something, but it came out with nothing. And this has been par for the course with AEW storytelling. They can build the momentum to get someone to that level, but they can't have them break through. And whatever that reason is, who knows? We can have that conversation. But, I think this is another example of a guy that we can talk about as well. This was later on the night in the death spot of the card following the Texas death match Wardlow is another example of had all the momentum. He got the TNT championship back, but it almost felt like, I don't know, it was an afterthought. And I don't know if you felt the same way. He felt lesser then. And I'm not sure if it's Sans ponytail, if it's the gear was different. He felt like a shell of what he was only 6 months ago.
Yeah, he's definitely not where he was. I think everyone kind of feels that. The haircut is a little different. Me and Sneed, when we were watching it, we were talking about his gear. He was kind of rocking the Taz, the trunks on the bottom with the singlet on top. Little different. It's always jarring when your guy steps out on a limb. I remember when Hangman debuted the pants. I was used to the trunks, and when he debuted the pants, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, but now I like the pants. It's just the fan in you. You don't know how you're going to like change until you get some time under it. But Wardlow, I'll say this. I didn't mind the match. I thought the match was good. Like you said, it was in the death spot. But the thing about this that I do like is Wardlow seems very motivated to gain back what he had. He seems very motivated to want to be on the show every week and be featured and be a fighting champion. So to see how he's really wanting to go after it makes me excited to see how they handle him. Now, if they don't handle him and knowing that he wants to be pushed and wants that screen time, we'll see, if there's any rifts from that. But I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you mentioned before is momentum. And, beating Samoa Joe can't be dismissed. It's a huge deal for him to choke him out doing what he did. Man, that was a huge moment for Wardlow, and they continue to give him things. And it's a matter of capitalizing on this. So this is another reset for Wardlow. He's back in the fold. He is the TNT champion. The last time he had this belt, it was disastrous. There's no way around it. The way the belt was booked with him was absolutely disastrous. It probably was the demise of the TNT championship in recent history for us. I mean, it had to be reset with Darby Allin being the champion and Samoa Joe. But now it's a chance for us to have some importance on Wardlow, keep him on our TV, make them build another star. Because at some point, he was the Dave Bautista to potentially taking that big spot of being that guy who turned his back on MJF. Now it's time to take the title. And maybe people thought eventually he could have beaten MJF. They have a lot of rehabilitation to do right now. They have to do that right now to get him back to that level. This is the first step in that direction, and it was the right step.
And I think he was kind of a victim of the time that he won the belt, because when he won that belt, the belt was already kind of sullied because of the back and forth between Scorpio Sky and Sammy Guevara flip-flopping that title. So, and he's coming in red hot off of Punk, MJF, that entire situation. And I feel like MJF and Wardlow both kind of suffered from the Punk brawl out shit. It just kind of compounded on itself. But I'm excited to see what he does to kind of regain those fans. Now, he did talk about, the perception that he cooled off. He's not as hot as he was. And I have the clip from the Scrum where he discusses this.
So it's going to start this Wednesday with Hobbs. Tonight, I dethroned the king of television. And I don't sit here to claim to be any type of a king. I sit here before you stating I am simply just a man claiming to be the best. And I look very forward to proving to this entire roster that I am. Because there's a lot of guys running around this roster calling themselves that. So with this title reign, my only goal is to prove them wrong. And it starts this Wednesday with Will Hobbs. And I will go to extreme measures to ensure that I walk out still the champion, still the best.
Corey Lee.
And to further that, I would like to, it's a conversation I need to have with him, but I would like to do the TNT Open Challenge because I want them all. I want our whole roster. I want people from other rosters. When I say I'm the best, I mean it, and I'm looking to prove it.
I love that he said, I want people from other rosters too, because if you remember the whole genesis of that TNT Open Challenge, Cody started that, and that Open Challenge gave us Eddie Kingston, gave us Ricky Starks. Warhorse from the Indies even got a little spot on Dynamite. So
Yep.
I would like to get back to that, man. I would really like to get back to just good, solid matches with maybe give him a feud bubbling underneath, and with open challenges every week, something like that.
Yeah, I would like to go back and watch this match in a tube by itself, because like I said, the damage around the card where it was, someone has to be I guess the detractor of being after the Texas death match. Someone had to follow that chaos, and we'll get into that match in a second. I just want to recognize Wardlow is a big guy doing very crazy things. He's great in the ring. The whisper in the wind that he pulled off too. It's amazing what he can do. He is a raw talent that they have to utilize to its maximum capacity. And I think the match probably was really good. It's just the crowd needed a release, and they needed a spot to take a break. And as we did as an audience, it's just, you only can have your attention as so far. And then hopefully he gets a good spot on Wednesday to go against Will Hobbs and crush it, because those two guys are the future of the big men in AEW. If we want to be serious about it, Will Hobbs and Wardlow have been, they've been on a collision course for a while, and I can't wait to see what they can do against each other.
Yeah, I get, as fans, when are we going to just give a mulligan to the death spot on pay-per-views?
You're right.
You know what I mean? Like, when you follow some big crazy match and the crowd's down because they've been so up for so long, and Bruce Pritchard calls it the let me up match, when your entire card is full of bangers, one of these bangers is going to suffer a weak crowd because of the spot on the card. I don't hold that against the guys. I mean, I don't even hold it against the booking. Like, who else do you put in that death spot? If you put the women's match in there, everyone cries. They're always in the death, So yeah. I try not to hold that against a match. I thought the match in and of itself was a solid match, and I liked that he choked out Joe. I thought it looked strong. Joe's a killer, man. They built him as a killer, and I liked it. I enjoyed it.
And now we close the book on this feud, and I think we're going to be moving towards Samoa Joe full-time in ROH for the time being right now. Obviously, he's defending the championship on ROH on Thursday against Tony Deppen, and he's not losing the title to Tony Deppen. I think his future is ROH for the time being. They need a concrete pillar that's there, and who better than Samoa Joe? And maybe down the line, obviously, there's AEW programming, but he's the perfect guy to be emphasized on that brand. So I'm okay with what happened here. You know what? He'll get his revenge. They'll build him back up to. I don't think it hurts Joe. So it was the perfect ending. It was clean. It was awesome.
Yeah, Joe. I don't think anything at this point in Joe's career can really hurt him.
Right.
He's in that special veteran spot where he can make chicken salad out about any piece of chicken shit. Like he's there.
So this other piece of the card too. Let's go to the Hangman versus Mox Texas Death Match, because I thought this was a huge piece of the card that lived up and then went past what I expected of this match. Because when I'm watching this match, obviously you're expecting blood, you're expecting hardcore, you're expecting weapons. I thought the psychology in this match was great. And you're showing the picture right here on YouTube. If you're not listening on audio, it's the finish of the match with the choke. This is Hangman's move. Like, if you go back and look at the history of Hangman, he's done this in New Japan. He's done it in ROH.
The noose.
And the Hangman literally had to choke the life out of Moxley to get one over on him. The thing that was confusing for a lot of people, including me watching this, is the classic Texas death matches. You are pinned and then you have to stay down for another 10 seconds. In New Japan Pro Wrestling, especially around Moxley, they changed the rules where it is the last man standing or you can submit. I think the announcers probably should have emphasized that, but I think obviously you have context clues you can pull together, like that's what they're doing. But other than that, man, the match was absolutely perfect. And we circled this as a Hangman Page rehabilitation project. And this is exactly what it was, to get him back up to the main event level. And kudos to Mox, man. Mox does it again, works his magic, sprinkles his hardcore dust on Hangman. It feels like he's leaving this feud better than he entered it, because he was damaged goods. Like they made Hangman, he was the main event in the first world title match in AEW history. He was a losing effort, but that story with Kenny Omega, the arc was a beautiful thing where he eventually won it from Kenny. And then after that, man, he was sort of the shrapnel of the CM Punk stuff that people don't really talk about. He wasn't directly involved in the physicality of the brawl out, but everything that went down damaged his reputation, damaged how people perceive him. He was looked as lesser than. Those Punk promos, they were damaging. So the fact that Mox took the time to really give him a lot of that rub that Mox has been cultivating since that huge run, it goes miles. And it shows also the perception of Hangman isn't the same as the one that Punk was putting out there. I think everyone respects where Hangman was and what he means to the AEW roster. He's a homegrown world champion. He really, I think he's the only one. If you go down the list, he is the guy that is the only one that's a homegrown champion. MJF as well. So those two guys are so integral in the process of developing the history of the company.
Yeah, Hangman is vitally important to this company. He's been a part of arguably one of the greatest stories told in the company, with his relationship with Omega, winning the titles, then challenging Omega for the belt, winning the belt from Omega. Like, I think what hurt him was obviously poor booking when he was champion. It all started there. It started way before Punk. It started with the way it's when Tony was trying to service everyone with his booking style. It's when he was doing the whole, I'll put you on this week, next week we're going to have a whole other group of guys. And he was rotating people in and out where you couldn't get attached to any one person, where Hangman's your champion. You have to feature him more. He had a couple lackluster, the Adam Cole feud was not great. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it was just kind of there. Obviously the Danielson matches were great, but
I mean, also the main feud was Lance Archer too, like not
Lance
great.
Archer,
he got his wins over him, but that title reign was meant to fail. I felt like it was destined to fail.
The thing coming out of this, like I've saw some people on Twitter and being blown away that they allowed Hangman to get Moxley to tap. And, he should have passed out. It should have been handled differently. I completely disagree with that. Like, I think, you said it, it's the Hangman Rehabilitation Project. Like, by getting the baddest son of a bitch on the roster to tap out to a move that has its origins in New Japan ROH with the noose he used to wear to the ring. It has a history. If you know the history, it's there. And I don't know, man. I thought it was a great way to elevate him back up to that top tier status. And I don't think it hurt Moxley at all to have to tap to that. That was a brutal, brutal move he was caught in. I didn't think less of him at all.
Yeah, I agree. That didn't cross my mind at all. These are two main event guys going at it, and this was the rubber match where both have gotten their wins, and someone had to come out, and the right choice was Hangman. No matter who you're a fan of, the right choice for AEW, the promotion, the brand, the future of it was Hangman a win. It doesn't do anyone any good for Mox coming out of that feud and come up over Hangman, because let's be honest, they've given Mox a lot. Mox has been that constant. He's been a multiple-time world champion. He's been the guy that they've leaned on. It's time to spread the love a little bit and give it to a guy like Hangman, because Hangman is a guy that has been, as you mentioned before, vitally important to what they're doing and what they will do in AEW. Whether people are fans of him or not, and they're going to be polarizing because of the Punk stuff, they have to understand Hangman was so important from the beginning, in the present, and the future of what AEW is doing.
And what they're doing right now dictates whether we're going to care about him 6, 7, 8 years from now, when Mox and those guys are slowing down a little bit. The history he's building now is giving him legitimacy when he is the guy. When he is the guy at the top of the card, headlining the pay-per-views. Like, when you have matches like this in his history, it legitimizes him to the fan base. Like, even with subconsciously, without you realizing, these are the type of things that add on to a man's legacy that makes him feel special, big, main event worthy. And it's these type of matches. This is wrestling at its best. This is a veteran with a lot of steam and love behind him in Jon Moxley, kind of reaching his hand out and pulling the young guy up and being like, hey, come up here with me,
Yeah, that's definitely how I view it as well. And Mox is obviously someone who loves AEW. He's said it in every interview he has. He believes in what they're doing. And he's, we look at wrestlers of the past, and we do shot nostalgia here on Turnbuckle Tavern, obviously. And you look at some of the veterans of the past, and just the mindset has shifted. We mentioned Jericho in the beginning, where he's giving wins to guys like Ricky Starks, Action Andretti. People, there's not the paranoia and the drive to consistently bury guys to keep your spot. That mindset have shifted, thankfully, where guys are looking out for the future of the roster. And it's cliche, but planting seeds of trees they'll never sit under.
Yep.
A guy like Action Andretti is going to be around much longer, hopefully, than Jericho after he's retired.
Yeah.
And that's, again, this is all sort of future thinking, progressive thinking, and the future of wrestling is in the hands of the current guys, and they're giving back.
Yeah, it's people that are doing it for the love of the game instead of the love of themselves. Like
the anti-Hogan, if you will.
Right.
But we also had the trios title as well. And this match, again, giving credit to the Turnbuckle Tavern, they should have at least come out in Turnbuckle Tavern gear, I think, the House of Black, because this, outside of just this match being showcased in a really good spot, we talked about death spots on the card. This was on a good spot of the card. House of Black and the Elite absolutely tore it up. This is how you build a division. I felt like we've had the trios division on shaky ground because of everything that went down from the initial end of the tournament, and the Elite having to drop the titles and then figure out a way to get them back on them. And it just felt very disjointed. It now feels like they are on the straight and narrow, figuring out their feet are steady. Man, this match was one of those moments you're going to look back and be like, this was one of the best matches in trios history. House of Black had their coronation, and rightfully so. And we mentioned, as far as moments, great moment. We have to see where they go from here. But man, goddamn, this match was awesome. There's so many highlights. This might have been match of the night. Like, if it wasn't on the card with MJF and Danielson, this match was absolutely epic. And to see House of Black get the win, it's just icing on top of the cake.
Yeah, and I think a lot of fans, when you see something like this, especially something that's been clamored for forever, like you said, we've been pushing for House of Black to have some sort of legitimacy for so long. And to see something like this, I think in the back of most fans' minds, the thought of the follow through creeps up. Like, okay, this was an awesome moment, but what's next? And I think sometimes maybe that thought kind of tampers with the feeling of the match itself, where this was a moment, man. You're so right. This was, you could argue, match of the night, I think. Like, obviously the main event, that's a whole other animal, and we'll get to that. But this was a very, very monumental match because it broke down a lot of things for me. Like, one, we're getting a group going over and put into a big spot, House of Black, that we've all wanted. But two, it also isn't one of those things where all the naysayers that say the Elite are playing backstage politics, not putting guys over. I don't agree with that sentiment, but I think this dispels that. And I thought it was so well done too, because everyone in this match, they managed to do two things simultaneously. They managed to give everyone their moments. It's not like one guy showed out. Everyone had their moments. Everyone looked strong, but at the same time, they did do a little bit of fan service, dream match, fantasy booker 101, when they had those brief little moments where you're looking at Omega and Malachi, and they have that moment, and you're just, as a fan, wondering, what if? Give me this one-on-one. So they're throwing the cheese out for the rats. They're planting the seeds of things. It's almost like a litmus test. There were moments in this match where I felt like Tony was like, let's put a little bit of this here and see how they react. And if the reaction's good enough, maybe that booking will happen down the road.
And this was obviously on the West Coast in San Francisco. That's the Young Bucks stomping ground. So they were the sentimental favorite, but House of Black, by the end of the night, they felt like they were just as much of a favorite. They were getting the cheers, and people were excited to see that moment. And it was one of those things where, until I saw it, I wouldn't have believed it, because it felt like House of Black was always going to be put on the back burner. And they're now sitting there as the trios champs. and they could be the guys that carry that division to the next level and get it to a spot where, all right, now it's a part of the card. There's meaningful stories being told. It's not just a subset of this item that's involved in a bigger story. I'm excited for that. And also the other consequence in a good way is getting the Elite away from the trios titles and having Kenny Omega potentially, as we start face to face with Malachi and Kenny. I need Kenny back in the main event. And I think, an MJF and Kenny program has money written all over it. That's another great program. We talk about what could be next for the world champion. We have a guy who hasn't gotten his championship match shot back since he's been back from his injury, looking better than ever. Don Callis has to be advocating for his man to get his title shot. And why not? And the Bucks too. The tag division kind of needs the Bucks back in there too. So it actually serves two masters at this point, and House of Black get their moment.
And I thought this little trios run did exactly what it was supposed to. It added a little heat to a new division. It shook it up for Kenny on his return. Because if you listen to him on Renee Paquette's podcast, he talked about how he wanted to come back in a different position. He didn't want to just come back off of an injury into a singles position. He wanted to come in and kind of chop it up with his buddies. I thought it was, and if nothing else, man, them having those titles and coming back with the trios run they had with the best of 7, it allowed them to put over House of Black. I mean, House of Black now enter their new title reign with a win over the Elite. In AEW, that's a big deal. That's a very big deal. Now, I don't want them to get lost. I don't want that title curse where they get the title and they're kind of on the back burner. I don't think that's the case though. I really do feel like there's a changing tide where Tony is seeing where if you lock in on people and you give the fans that they attach to people quicker than how he was booking them before. We've seen House of Black be booked into oblivion with just promos every week. It's not doing a whole lot for them. So I think this is a good thing, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
So you also have Jamie Hayter retaining over Saraya and Ruby Soho, which was in a spot of the card that people were reacting to it. Jamie Hayter is clearly the most over woman on the roster right now, and Britt is playing second fiddle, which is a bizarre thing that we can talk about. And I think there's a big money feud potentially with Jamie and Britt once they're done with this outsider versus original feud that they're doing here. The right decision was to keep the title on Jamie. I know there were some people saying maybe Saraya would have won. And the most obvious thing is Ruby joining the freelancers, the outsiders, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, I thought this match was good. Not a big fan of the storyline itself, but I think obviously it's doing its job. It's keeping people involved and they're telling cohesive stories. And at the end of the day, Jamie Hayter is still the champion. She deserves to be the champion because she's not only very talented, but she's very, very over. And it's quite clear every audience she goes in front of, people react in a strong way to her.
Yeah, I think the match was solid. I think the story has lacked screen time. I like the story. I think there's potential there for them to really dive into some shit. And I think with Ruby Soho joining the outsiders, I think that adds an interesting wrinkle to me, especially if they pull the trigger on something big where now Britt and Jamie are outnumbered. I think you have the possibility to bring Jade up into that spot to help them. Jade was missing off this card. I think this is how you bring her, throw her right in with the top women in the division. I love that Jamie kept the title though. I think they did it right. Like they kept it on her. They didn't have to screw her out of the title for Ruby's turn. Like they let her take the gold home. It added legitimacy to the AEW originals. You didn't just give it to the WWE legend coming in Paige / Saraya. So I thought it served a couple masters. I like that they shot the angle at the end with Ruby though. I think a lot of people thought it was going to happen. But still, yeah, sometimes predictability in wrestling is the best thing. And I thought it was the right move.
And the other thing with this is obviously Tony Khan was asked about Mercedes at the scrum. I know we have the clip here, so let's play it before we get into it.
At one point this year, it seemed like you guys were teasing Mercedes Moné coming to AEW at some point. at least in the mystery tag as a mystery tag partner. Were there any discussions with her, and is there any interest in working with her now that she's IWGP Women's Champion?
Well, I have a ton of respect for the IWGP Women's World Champion. She's a tremendous wrestler. I wouldn't want to comment on discussions I'm having with any wrestler who's a free agent, in particular, a wrestler who's a champion of one of our partners. But a ton of respect for that great wrestler, and that's somebody any wrestling company would be very fortunate to have wrestling for them.
Very sly look on Tony's face.
He makes that dude. He knows he's got her locked up already. She's coming Forbidden Door. He has the look looking like it is.
Yeah, she's Forbidden Door bound. I wouldn't be shocked if she somehow gets entangled in this Outsiders versus Originals storyline. And I wouldn't be shocked if somehow this entanglement leads to her and Jade Cargill at a certain point.
That's where the money is. It's Jade versus Monet. We talked about that on the show last week, and it did really well. There was a lot of discussion on. There was 3 topics, but the topic that everyone wanted to talk about was Jade. It just speaks to her star power, where people want to know where she's going to go. And I think if you look at specific matchups and you want to follow where the money is, it's Jade versus Mercedes. Like, I think that's where it is. Whether it's at Forbidden Door or Double or Nothing or whatever the stage is, people will seek it out and want to be a part of it. And the booking aside, it's challenging who goes over and who doesn't. But I think the right decision is to have that match because it can bring the women's championship up to a different level. You got to find a way to have Jade being champion by then. And then if Monet can still be the champion of the women's champion of IWGP and keep it that way. So fuck yeah.
I think that's why the thing I've said about this storyline, they're not giving me everything they could on TV, but I pause at saying it's a bad storyline. I think it's a great storyline. They just they haven't realized what they have yet and showcased it properly, because if done correctly, this could be monumental for the women's division. I truly think there is a ton of great storylines all interconnected in here, not just Originals, Outsiders. Like you said, Jade, Mercedes, possibly. You've got Jamie and Britt. If that ever goes south at the tail end of this storyline, that could come out of this. There's a ton of things that there could be multiple storylines for these women all within this one big storyline. So I like the storyline. I just want them to execute it better.
And speaking of women, the Bellas were backstage at Revolution. I know we have the photo here to show them. They've been stirring quite the controversy up with everybody ever since that Nikki's no longer married to John Cena. So she's no longer a consummate person behind the brand. She's speaking her mind, and she's been very critical. Brie, not so much, but Nikki's been outspoken. I know they were both critical about the Raw 30 anniversary not being included, but very interesting. I don't know if they have a piece. Obviously, they're friends with Renee. They have friends from WWE that are there. I don't think this is anything more than just visiting some friends and watching some wrestling. I don't think the Bellas have a
Brian's in the main event. Bree's husband.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
But I think don't be dumb, fans. They take this picture and put it on social media to stir shit. That's what you do. These are... The UFC used to do it all the time. Some free agent, he's just at the UFC event. Let's take a picture of him there. Like, that's boxing, MMA, any combat promoter. That is like 101. And yeah, they're there visiting. Soraya's got a match. Danielson's in the main event. Renee's their friend. Of course. But they didn't have to post that shit to social media. They knew with all the heat they've been throwing towards WWE. I love stuff like that. I thought it was cool that they were backstage at the show. I thought that was fun.
The other match before we get into pretty much the two main stories of the night, Jungle Boy defeated Christian Cage in a final burial match. I still stand by, like I said, on Extra Cooler back in September. It should be called Dirt and Stuff, but they called it Final Burial. This was again, I don't know what the fallout of this feud is, if Christian's trying to be written off TV. It was a weird stipulation for two guys that don't have any history in the dark arts. Like, the Undertaker is usually around every Buried Alive match. If I had to pick the first ever Buried Alive a Jace match of AEW, for $1 million, I would never have picked Jungle Boy and Christian. I guess the tie-in is obviously they're always bringing up Jungle Boy's late dad. But I was okay with this match. I mean, there were some bright spots. You got Jungle Boy wearing the hardcore gear. It was sports entertainment for sports entertainment. Obviously, Christian wearing the turtleneck gear. I had no issue with it. I mean, the goofiness with the casket dropping down, kind of funny. But again, suspending disbelief and suspending reality in wrestling is part of wrestling. And sometimes every card, it's an eclectic mix, a buffet, if you will. And this was part of it. This was the goofy shit of the card. And it was a good match. I mean, Jungle Boy and Christian, the story has been weird and Christian has been carrying with the promos, but it was certainly memorable. I'll give him that.
I didn't mind it, man. I know the guys over on the wrap up were going hard on this. Not believable. It was silly. I honestly didn't mind it. It was probably my least favorite on the card as far as overall, but even saying that, like, it was what it was. Like it,
Yeah.
and it wasn't bad. Christian got me in on this last promo he cut before the event. The final burial angle, Luke Perry, it kind of worked. I was missing the big mound of dirt that I'm used to on a WWE Buried Alive match. I didn't like how the setup of the coffin looked. I wish there was a little more pomp and circumstance and theatrics behind that, but the overall match, it was fine. Moving on, hope Jungle Boy moves on to possibly an Orange Cassidy feud for the All Atlantic title. I would really love to see that.
Or also, too, we're talking about the champion MJF. I know the history between MJF and Jungle Boy's there. Man, that is a future feud that would pay off for having AEW Originals. You want to really, flex for everybody and say, we've built this. Nothing bigger than MJF and Jungle Boy in a big spot on a pay-per-view eventually. Like, just take off the training wheels of ex-WWE guys and have
definitely
your guys. Darby, MJF, Sammy, and obviously Jungle Boy would be huge to be like, we're establishing ourselves past needing other people from the outside.
Yeah.
And of course, the Guns retain their tag titles in the very controversial Fatal 4-Way here. And controversial because Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal were part of it. Danhausen and Orange Cassidy felt like they put 4 teams together for no reason. They were just trying to continue the story with the Acclaimed and the Guns. Danhausen was in there for one reason and one reason only, to curse people, but also, I guess, 2 reasons: to get pinned, because he's the guy who had to take the pin here.
Yeah.
Biggest thing here, man, FTR shows up wearing our boy Nick from Extra Cooler's design on the shirt. Congrats. So proud of you, Extra Cooler. Well-deserved. So talented. And funny enough, I was texting Matt on the side. Matt from Extra Cooler, give him a follow. Matt's Extra Cooler. Matt's in the Extra Cooler, right? Matt's in the cooler.
Matt's in the cooler, I think.
Matt's in the cooler. I saw the design, and I know he had Dax had asked for a print. And I knew it was an Extra Cooler design just by his very significant, impressionable style. And I was like, I said, to everyone around me, I was like, that's my boy Extra Cooler. And sure enough, awesome shit. I was so proud of him. And obviously FTR is back. Huge. That's going to live forever. And they're in his shirt. Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, they return on a pay-per-view and they're rocking Nick's design. What's cooler than that?
It's so sick. But we had FTR returning, and we knew this was happening down the line. Whether we knew this would be a long-term situation, we knew there had to be a payoff with the Guns. The Guns have been teasing this. We've had this history with the Guns, and it seems like they're gunning, no pun intended, for these tag titles. And why not, man? This is like a nice little shot in the arm of the tag division. We mentioned the Bucks potentially back in the fold after losing the trios, but you get FTR back. They're the hottest act all throughout last year, and now they're back to claim their AEW Tag Team Championships and really take the Guns to the next level. Like, this program could take the Guns up to the next level, and whether they take the titles or not, they're going to benefit from working with 2 masters that are committed to being here now. It seems like they're committed to being here.
Yeah, there's so many takes on this whole situation with all these tag teams that drive me nuts. And one is just the overall hate for the Guns. I mean, part of it, I'm like, dude, you're being worked. But there's people out there that just don't, that kind of throw them shade like they're in a spot they shouldn't be in. I think the Guns are one of the more entertaining tag teams in this company. We've been big on them for a long, long time, pushing the Guns. But I'll say this. On the last flagship show, when they announced it was Orange Cassidy and Danhausen to take that 4th spot, me and Sneed were hot. We did not like the decision. I thought it was just trying to get 2 guys in there. that were popular. And, they did have the tie with Best Friends, obviously, and Best Friends got jumped by Jay Lethal and the Gun, so they're kind of stepping in. So there was a little bit of story. It wasn't like they just got threw in there completely. But I will say, if FTR didn't come out, this match would have suffered for it.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact, because we all thought FTR was going to be one of those 4 teams just by their storyline with the Guns. So when they came out, it almost made me okay with the way they booked this match. I was like, okay, now it makes sense. You wanted that big pay-per-view return. It made sense to me. I kind of, it made me warm up to the match. And the people that were saying, put the belts back on the Acclaimed, why? Why would you do that? That is so short-sighted. They do not need belts. They're the most overact in the company. If any team in this division doesn't need to be world champion, it's the Acclaimed. All we want to see is Caster come down, light some fool up in the ring with a rap, and then get their gimmicks in a match, and the crowd's going to love them. The Acclaimed are better chasing, I think. I don't think when they have the belts and they're on top and everyone's coming at them, it's not as interesting. Even the raps suffer for it. You're the guy, you're on top. Their whole gimmick of coming down to the ring, working their way towards those titles, that's what's fun to me. I don't want the Acclaim to get those belts back so fast. I like when a heel team that not a lot of people hold belts for a while. It makes it interesting. I think they're building the Guns into super heat seekers right now. And with FTR returning, dude, it's only going to get better, because I think FTR, Dax has said he really respects those guys because they have the right mind for the business. They're, sons of Billy Gunn. They've been raised right as far as storytelling, in-ring psychology. I think we're about to see something special. And, Dax, as soon as they came out, Dax got on Twitter and tweeted, "We ain't done yet." So, they were kind of teasing and making us think, oh, they might leave. But PW Insider, they're reporting that FTR are believed to be locked into long-term deals with AEW. Their disappearance and tease of going elsewhere was just a storyline cover.
Yeah, I mean, Dax has been certainly the epicenter of controversy with this podcast, and that is sort of the fallout of having a platform with long form conversations on a podcast and speaking your opinion. But at the end of the day, AEW is the place for them, and I think at this point, going to WWE would have been a misstep. It might have been a legacy thing for them. They wanted a WrestleMania moment or whatever it is, but I think they recognize, and this is also one of those things is. You mentioned it before, I think on the debate and in the past, where not everybody has to get along with everybody. It's a workplace, but I think everyone can recognize, Guns included right now. This is an example of it, building up the Guns as that equal to a team like FTR. They were a team that was pretty much on dark. They were not doing anything but just trying to get their feet under them. And here they are as the champion standing tall against a team like FTR and coming out on top against teams like the Acclaimed. It just speaks to pushing young talent and utilizing your veterans in the right way and putting them on a platform. And do I think FTR is going to be walking out with championships? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean the Guns are buried. That means that they're better for feuding with this team. And it's a long form story. This has been building for a bit, and the Guns will always have that win over FTR. They will always have that. And I think we're going to see many tag team championship reigns from the Guns. This is the first of many. I would love to see this go until May, and FTR and the Guns, and FTR takes titles in May. And that's a great first run for the Guns from now.
Absolutely. I mean, a couple weeks ago on Wrestling Tonight, we talked about the Guns were signed to a long-term deal. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. This is a team we're going to see for a long time. They're super young. They have the pedigree, the second generation pedigree. And we've heard Dax and Cash talk countless times about the thing they like about wrestling more than collecting titles and everything like that is putting guys over, and not so much sometimes that doesn't mean going over in the match, but just getting guys over. That, like you said, Ace, them being in there with FTR, it's just like we were talking about with Mox and Hangman. They're elevating this young squad to a point where they're going to feel equal. Dax and Cash want it to eventually get to a point where when the Guns and FTR are in the ring, it feels like it's mano a mano. It doesn't feel like, it's a squash. It's a handicap match. What's going on here? These guys don't deserve to be in the ring. I think this is just wrestling booking at its finest. If you're mad about you want a champion that you hate to have the title, and you want that baby face to ensure FTR isn't like these underdogs. They're arguably one of the most decorated teams wrestling today, but that's kind of their gimmick. You know what I mean? Like, they are the belt guys. They had 3 tag team titles, and now it's been a long time since they held those AEW straps. And I think by them having that 2022 of holding all those other titles and then coming back around to go after the titles they really want, it's going to elevate those AEW tag titles back to where they need to be.
Yeah, much needed. And I think obviously the Guns have a bright future ahead of them, and FTR recognizes that. But if you go down the list of champions right now, MJF, Jamie Hayter, Wardlow, the Guns, Orange Cassidy, like, you want to look at it, people that are uninformed, uninitiated, whatever the word is about their fandom in AEW, that just want to look at surface and be like, they just take ex-WWE guys and sign them. And
that's such a dumb
the
take,
land of
man.
misfit toys. It's just a shit take. It's a horrible take, because if you look at what they do about building these teams and building young stars, they find a way to build them. And point in case the Guns, and point in case the next match we're going to talk about, fucking MJF. Like, they took this to the next level, and they continue to add to his resume of being the fastest rising star in wrestling with such a bright future ahead. People forget how young he really is and what he's accomplished in this past just 12 months alone. Lighting the world on fire with obviously the Double or Nothing incident, and then taking it and building on that momentum. Dude, let's get into this Iron Man match and give it its just due. MJF obviously retained. I think we all predicted that, but there was a really good moment in the middle of that match where, for a second, and we didn't watch it together, but I'm assuming you're just like me, where you were like, they might do this. They might put the title on Bryan Danielson.
Dude, me and Sneed were saying, like, there were like 3 or 4 times toward the back end of the match where I started feeling like, fuck, man, they might pull the trigger on Daniel. Like, they might do this. Like, because I went in, there's no way he's going to win by shenanigans. Something's going to happen. That's great storytelling within a match, because I totally bought in, especially that in the sudden death portion of the match, those last 6-7 minutes, dude, those near falls had me up off my seat. I'm like, they're going to do it. They're going to do. And when MJF kicked out of that running knee, it was beautiful, because they had him. That knee was so devastating earlier in the match that you thought it was over. When he hit that clean, it's over, and he kicks out. Dude, they didn't make him look. I know he's a chicken shit heel. There's portions of his character that have that chicken shit heel aspect. I think he's more layered than just that.
Right.
But man, they didn't make him look like a bitch at all in this match. He had those, he was powdering to the outside, getting his sips of water, doing all of those type of mind games. But man, he looked like a tough bastard in this match to me. It elevated him. Like, if you don't think this guy is a world champion caliber guy, you're insane. You're a hater, and you just don't want to like the kid. Give the kid his due. Give the kid his props. We talked about how this match was all about making, in kayfabe, can he go the distance with Danielson? But also in the real world, like, can this guy hang? Like, does he have this was a way to shut up his haters. And man, did he. And before I have a question I want to ask you, but talking about his haters and all of this, MJF spoke on his haters at the post-fight scrum.
I was reading people actually saying 60 minutes MJF. I don't know if he can do that. Fucking what? What? It's outrageous. So are we done? I'm asking you guys, because you are the cream of the crop of the marks. Are we done pretending? Are we done pretending that MJF isn't the most complete wrestler? I'm fucking sick of it. No more pretending that I can't go as well in the ring as I can on the microphone. Enough already. It's over. It's done. Stop comparing me to dumb motherfuckers that can only talk. I am not one-dimensional. Enough.
I mean, there you go. He like when he said that, I was like, thank you for saying that, because that's what's running in my head right now. Like, if you're still saying this guy can't go after his match with Darby Allin, after his match with Takeshita, all of these matches he's had that have been so just clinics of great storytelling, and they're still hating on him. But I love that clip. But the question I have for you, Ace, is this the greatest Iron Man match?
Ooh, that's a tough question. And I think it's too soon to say. I'd have to really let it marinate for a second. But on the initial reaction, it's hard to say greatest Iron Man match. It might be one of the greatest matches in AEW history, in the short history. I think I'm able to at least put that out there right now. It's MJF's best match for sure. It's one of Bryan's best matches, which is a high bar to reach. I'd have to go back and watch. I mean, from initial watch, it hangs there. And I don't want to have the recency bias tag on it, but it's up there. And the fact that we're even having the conversation that's in the same conversation as Brett and Sean, or even, Brock and Kurt Angle, and even go down the list with Rock and Triple H. It definitely, it's up there. And there's not that many Iron Man matches that delivered, because, and also I noted halfway through the match as I'm sitting there watching with some people, and I'm like, this is one of the fastest hours ever. Like, a lot of times they drag, and that's a credit to the pacing of the match. I felt like you could split the match into 5 different mini matches where it wasn't even just separated by falls. It was separated by moments and who's on top, and really what story they're trying to tell. I mean, obviously you mentioned the water around the ring. You can mention like selling the knee. You have selling the shoulder of Bryan. It was so expertly
put table together. Spot. I mean,
it felt, and like MJF in the scrum too, him walking around like Willy Wonka prior to him, with the gates
eating
open.
The pickles.
Like, who's gonna take by the chocolate factory away from me as he's limping? Expertly done. And MJF is a master of blurring the lines of kayfabe and reality. And where is that line with MJF? He even mentioned before, he has this giant horn on his head coming out, which is a huge welt, which he was gushing blood following that headbutt. And I'm like, is it possible that he's actually bleeding from that? Did he cut himself too hard? But he had a legitimate shoot welt that was like coming out of the top of his eyebrow. I mean, there's so much to break down. Like, I honestly believe this match is going to go down as one of the greatest matches in company history. And there's so much that works against it with the short attention span of fans, and the fact that it's hard to go 60 minutes and keep people invested. And they did that and more. They went almost 70 minutes. And this was, I loved it. And the right decision is to have the title on MJF, but not for him. And Bryan Danielson's my favorite wrestler of all time, up there with the greats. There was a piece of me that was sitting there on the edge of my seat. Like, they might do it. I'm going to have this moment forever. And he makes him tap with the fucking LaBelle lock. That is bravo, Tony.
Bravo. And that's another thing we talked about with Mox tapping to Hangman. You made Danielson tap regardless of the situation. You made him tap. What? I bet Danielson's like, he wanted that. No, I want you to tap me. This will be huge for you. I want you to tap me. Because recency bias aside, obviously there's a lot of Iron Man matches to properly decide if this is the greatest one. You would want to go rewatch some of those landmark matches and really make an informed decision. But I don't remember any Iron Man match making me feel like that one did. Like, looking back and being like, oh, Brett and Sean, it's so easy. It's so easy to have nostalgia paint a match and put this sheen on it that, I'll be quite honest, man. When I was a kid, I remember that match boring me. I remember that match. I love the guys involved, 2 of my favorites of all time, but I don't remember that match being so high paced like this one. I heard, I think Meltzer or someone talking about, usually 60-minute match, you're getting a lot of chin locks. You're getting a lot of resting, a lot of dragging your feet to pass that time. There was none of that here. Even in the moments when he's sipping the water, it came off like classic heel shit. Like the water became a heel itself. Because it's like, here's Danielson's not drinking water. Why do you need water? It was just, I don't know. I loved it. It's my favorite, like gut reaction
Right.
in the moment. It's my favorite. I was so compelled, so sucked in. I thought it was great.
And before we move on, getting a lot of buzz on that Turnbuckle Tavern. I follow at Turnbuckle Tavern, by the way, on Instagram. It's blowing up. That post you made with Sean, and there's a lot of marks in those comments that are hot. So
they're hot about it.
I appreciate the sentiment no matter what. So it was great.
Yeah. And the last little bit with MJF, obviously, he beats Daniels, and we're all wondering what's next. What's next for MJF? Who's going to be the guy to step up? Does someone step up Wednesday at Dynamite? Maybe. Who's going to be that guy that answers the challenge? There's a lot of people that could take that spot. And I think a lot of people, a lot of fans, journalists, we're all wondering who's next for Maxwell Jacob Friedman. They asked MJF at the scrum, who's next? Who's your dream match? And he had a pretty good response.
To be brutally honest, like I said, there's a lot of people on my radar. I am fully aware that Hangman Adam Page is a good competitor. I'm also fully aware of how I won this. Anybody know who I beat for this Dynamite Diamond Ring originally? Hangman Adam Page. I think Hangman is scared of MJF, and I think Hangman knows better than to come anywhere near MJF for the time being. There are other people here that I genuinely, really, really don't like. I also don't love the fact that a guy like Jungle Boy or Darby Allin or Sammy Guevara is allowed to walk around like they are homegrown superstars. Yes, they're homegrown. They're very solid. But at this point, I think it is very obvious that there is only one pillar that actually holds this place up. So kind of would like to prove a point there. Adam Cole was talking shit on Twitter. Wasn't a fan of that. Think he should keep his fucking mouth shut, and maybe he should tell his girlfriend of his to do so as well. Are there more people? Sure. I don't like Claudio Castagnoli's face. I think Eddie Kingston's a crybaby bitch, and I think he's also a little punk, and I wouldn't mind getting a chance to slap him across his blue-collar face. There's a lot of people that I would love to absolutely demolish both on the microphone and in the ring, but as I said, I don't do dream matches. The only dream I have is to hold this and for the reign of terror to last in eternity. Next question.
I mean, he just gave us every person we want to see him go against. So it's like, who knows who's going to get the call?
Well, so book that out for the next year. I mean, I would love to see just the AEW pillars to pass around feuds, and then maybe eventually down the line, a guy like Darby or a guy like Jungle Boy, even Sammy having meaningful programs with MJF. Not saying those guys are ready to take the title from him, but I mean, even go down the line too. People have circled Eddie Kingston as the guy to come back into the fold and take the title away from MJF. I'm not sure if I believe that should be true, but a guy like Adam Cole is ready, set to go there. And I don't know how it does for Adam Cole to lose in his first meaningful program back. That might be a step backwards for him. Maybe he needs to have some wins under his belt prior to doing that. I'm not meaning job wins. It needs to be like program wins at this point. Adam Cole is another rehabilitation project that Tony needs to take seriously. I love Jungle Boy. I think Jungle Boy is the perfect next feud for him. Tell the story for a while and have the match. Like, I think that might be right there, ready made. And Jungle Boy I think it benefits Jungle Boy to be in a program, even if he winds up losing. I think it could really tell the story consistently that Jungle Boy just is close to that level. MJF just gets one over, and it just adds to the story of really these two are just parallel careers that are rising together.
Yeah, I don't want to see. I want to see Cole in a program with him, but not yet. I want to build him up to where we need it to happen. I'm with you. A Jungle Boy would be a nice little feud in between a big feud. Eddie would be a nice. I don't see Eddie taking the title off of him. As much as I love Eddie, I feel like that heavyweight title's tricky, man. There's a lot of people that could carry that strap, and you got to be very smart with who you throw it on. So let's see. Let's see what happens.
Let's go with our second story. And I think the second story ties right in. We mentioned Hangman, but we also mentioned a former champion. He was only champion for about, a day? But CM Punk is close to being medically cleared. And this is sort of tied with the story. Obviously, there's been that story that's been passing around the dirt sheets saying that before the match at All Out, that CM Punk sat on Tony Khan's porch and they just talked about not wanting to work with Hangman, refused to put him over. That story has been denied since. But let's start with the first part of the story. He's ready to return. This has been a topic of conversation. Are they bringing him back? Is he someone that AEW should bring back? Or do they need to bring him back? He's clearly has a desire to wrestle. He has friends there that are locked up long-term now with FTR. What do you say about this with Punk being ready to return? Half of me thought he was coming out to challenge MJF at the end of the pay-per-view last night.
I wouldn't have been shocked because we all know, like, it came out that MJF was supposed to be the one to take the title off of Punk. You know, he was supposed to get his comeuppance from the dog collar match, and then everything, went belly up with the brawl out, and Mox had to be put into that situation, and they had to just kind of move with it. But man, I think Punk should definitely be back. I mean, if you listen to the debate that dropped today, we had, does AEW need Punk back? Obviously, do they need him? No, I mean, they don't need anyone, but I think there's a lot of things, a lot of people there need Punk for various reasons, from Tony Khan to the company itself, to the elite, to the fans. I think Punk needs to be in that company. He needs to be in that company. It shows fans that you are willing to do business for the greater good of the stories you're providing the fans. And me and Sneed were talking about it last night as we're watching, an FTR comes out, and we're just kind of talking about it. And I'm like, they've waited and they've let the dust settle. And as I was back and forth, flip-flopping, but at one point I was like, no, get that guy out of here. But as the dust settles and you look back on that moment at All Out, it really feels like a ridiculous move to fire that guy over that. When there's that much money on the table, when you're in a contract year, he talked shit about people. He made Tony look bad. There was a fight in the back locker room. Who cares? It doesn't feel as big and devastating to me now, this far removed from it. It seems like a bitch move to can a guy over what happened. Especially when you're hearing everyone's take and everyone's like, yeah, I've moved on from it. I wish everybody, Kenny's whole take on it was just kind of like, oh, whatever, we're not water under the bridge type of sentiment. And I just feel like it's not good pro wrestling business. This isn't a corporate job in an office, guys getting in a fight. Yeah, somebody's going to lose their job probably. This is a combat entertainment thing. You gotta go. You gotta do it. Bring him back.
Absolutely. And time heals all. Like, it sounds cliche, but it is a true fact. Like, as time goes on, this seems less egregious than it really was. And of course, people are never going to forget what Punk did and said, and he's always going to have haters in the back. And, some of us are fans. Like, I was a fan, no longer a fan, but that doesn't mean I don't want him in the company, because I believe there's meaningful story. And I think the biggest point that you said on the debate that I just listened to today was they need to, as far as their moments go, they don't want that moment of Punk returning in Chicago to be absolutely blackballed from their history. That needs to be part of their catalog of bringing wrestling fans what they want and having a meaningful impact on wrestling and bringing people back together. And this is a good rehabilitation story that we can have. And the ending of this story is yet to be written. So at this point, we can look back at Brawl Out, and it could be one of those situations where it can be like almost the unsafe working condition stuff on a bigger stage with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, where Bret Hart pulled out Shawn Michaels' hair and he took the clump of hair and threw it at Vince's desk in Gorilla. And they, look at them now. They're not friends by any means, but they can sit down and interview and talk about it. I long for the day 20 years from now where they're sitting behind a camera and talking about what happened and being like, Larry, that was crazy, right? Like, I would love to have those stories being told. And you're right. Wrestling is about these stories. And this is not the most egregious thing that has ever went down in a wrestling locker room, bar none. I mean, we just go watch Dark Side of the Ring about the shit that goes down in locker rooms and the egos that get put out there. I mean, goddamn, Bruiser Brody, like there's this shit that goes down. There's shit that goes down that is unforgivable. This is something that can be forgivable as long as people get in the room and be adults. At the end of the day,
that's it.
It's about being adults and apologize and taking accountability for your actions. And at the end of the day, it's about the fans and about building programs. And there's unfinished loose ends with CM Punk and AEW, and that potentially it would benefit a guy like MJF to have Punk back to give him that final run because he didn't get his win back. It would love to have that program. And guys like Punk also too, again, putting my personal feelings aside about what went down and like his aftermath of what he said, he helped build a lot of these guys. I mean, he really had small pockets of guys that he was helping to. We talked about the rub that FTR's given. Punk really manufactured these guys and put a special polish on them, like a guy like Darby Allin, guy like, Powerhouse Hobbs. Those guys felt special after they worked with Punk. And that says something. These are veterans that don't have to do that. And I think obviously Punk was wrong in the situation. I think I've been very clear about my opinion. I was blocked by Punk on Instagram because of it. But I think the benefit of him coming out, him having a program, and him being involved in the main event again, that's what's best for AEW as a whole. And, you can't deny that. Him being disappearing from history, that's not a good thing.
No, the biggest from the debate, the biggest thing that really hit with me is just, you have to take your history under control. You have to own your own history. And if you let that be the end of him in this company, all of that seems for naught. All of that seems like it was just kind of like, oh, there was this brief moment he was here and it kind of went off the rails and nothing ever came from it. Like, dude, there's so much on the table. Like an Omega Punk feud. Are you kidding me? Like, there's so many matches. I was wanting, when he first came in the company, Adam Cole and Punk. There were so many matches that I think is there. And they have to take control of their history. That they have to, for the betterment of this company and the stories they're telling, they have to take control of that history and not let it just fall by the wayside. This is a big moment for Tony Khan to show, like, this is a big Booker moment where it's like, can you make the tough decisions that maybe might make a few in the locker room not happy? You've got to smooth it over for the better of the business, for the better of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the history of CM Punk, obviously he was always going to have his detractors, but you mentioned AEW's history. That's an important part. They're still making their footprint of what they are in the wrestling business. And this is Tony Khan's legacy we're talking about as far as being able to bring people together and overcome adversity. Because the storyline and the narrative has been Tony Khan lost control of his locker room. He couldn't get people in the same room and to do business with money on the table. And I know people talk about really the people that were physical with each other that night with the Elite and CM Punk. I honestly think the biggest mending offenses would be just a Hangman Page and CM Punk in the room at the same time, shaking hands, because I think that's the core of the issue. It's Hangman and CM Punk, and maybe down the line, a huge money feud with Hangman and CM Punk. If Punk is willing to come back and swallow his pride and apologize, the biggest, I guess, thing that Tony Khan could put on the table would be, I need you to put over Hangman, dude, and I need you to do it in a big way. And like that might have to be a deal breaker.
That's what wrestling is built on, is these real life things that fans kind of tap into. It adds weight to, and you know, it goes back to owning your history. That is a big money match because of the history between them, not just in front of the camera, but we know the story behind the scenes. Or, you know, not all of it, obviously, we're fans, but like the stuff that leaked out with, you know, Dax talked about the promo that Hangman cut and it kind of rubbed Punk the wrong way. All of that, when you have all of that little bit of history and you bring it back around to a future feud, those are things you have to put your egos aside, get in the room, say you're sorry, and let's do business. That's all I keep saying. You know, I know it's like beating a dead horse, but it really is about putting your own bullshit aside, be a man, don't let your feelings get hurt and get in the way of what we're all here to do, and that's give fans incredible storytelling. And come to the table, let's do this. This could be the back end of 2023, man, could be absolutely phenomenal if they want it to be.
Yeah, and the story that was disproved by Meltzer in the latest Observer was that Tony Khan went to LA and sat on the porch of Punk's home in LA, booking out summer creative plans with Paige, nowhere close to being in the mix because, and I quote, Punk wasn't going to work with him. And he said, no way they were going back to him at any point. So in an update from Meltzer, he notes that Khan changing the finish to Punk versus Paige is not true. It was said that Punk was always set to win a Double or Nothing, and Tony Khan wanted the AEW World title on Punk months before the return to Chicago. That has been disproved, but that was a huge, like, damn, if that was what was going on, that's toxic shit. Like, we talked about the right moves from veterans, about putting guys over and figuring out ways to make them better. That's some old school Hulk Hogan shit. Like, don't take my spot, kid. I'm glad it's disproven. I'm not saying it actually happened, but the fact that
I never bought that shit.
The fact that that's in sort of the news cycle, that's a bad thing that we need to rinse out. I think Punk really is going to be, if he does return, it will be a good outreach for him to be like, get back behind a microphone and tell his side of the story. Like, I know that they can't tell the specifics about what went down behind that door or through that kick door or whatever the hell you want to call it.
Yeah.
It's about him talking about now at this point, his legacy. It's no longer just about, you know, what went on that day. It's about what happens after this. And I think that's a big piece to what Punk is going to be remembered for. This could be a blip or this could be his whole legacy. I think he doesn't want it to be his full, what he's remembered for.
Yeah, you've got to take control of your story, you know, your real story, your legacy. And, you know, I'm glad that this report came out. I never really bought that report because Punk always seemed like a Terry Funk guy. He seemed like one of those guys. I remember early in his interviews that he was giving when he first came to the company, I think he was even asked, like, he was like, I don't want the title right now. You know, I want to work with the young guys. He never rubbed me. He's a lot of things. You know, he seems like he's moody. He's cantankerous. He can be a bit of a smart ass. He can be a bit of an asshole. I'm a bit of an asshole. I never hated the guy for that. But one thing I never thought that he was a, I want to go over guy. The Hogan shit. He always seemed like a guy that hated those type of guys to me.
I just think that became personal with Hangman. Like the only reason I would have bought that was because of the history and what he felt about Hangman going
the Colt Cabana
and the Colt stuff. So I'm glad it's not true because that's just another reason that they can bury the hatchet. Because if that's something that Tony Khan was put under pressure by Punk with those decisions, like it muddies the water even further. And there's other shit that we don't even know as well. There's stuff that goes on that hasn't even been able to be talked about. So if they can get over it, fans will react the way they want to react. He gets booed, he gets cheered. It doesn't really matter at this point.
Right.
It's just we need him back in the fold to add to the product because he's missed. Let's be honest. He's been missed.
He's a big name. He's a huge figure in the sport that you've got under contract. Get him on our TV. That's how I feel now.
So speaking of being on TV, we have our number 3 story here, and it's Brock Lesnar, dude. And there's been stories about Brock Lesnar potentially being done with WWE. I know that when Vince first was sort of under the allegations and was being removed from his position, he left the day on SmackDown because he just wanted to work under Vince, under a handshake deal. And they convinced him to stay. Obviously, the bag speaks for itself. He figured out a way to stay on board for a couple matches, put some guys over. This story is 2 parts or 3 parts. Let's be honest. It's the Bray Wyatt piece that he was supposed to be working with Bray and the new character that Bray's been cultivating.
Could you imagine that? Could you imagine a Lesnar Bray Wyatt? No. As soon as I was like, Brock's not going to.
Lesnar felt the same way as you because he nixed the idea from the jump, and now we have Lesnar versus Omos that is on the docket for WrestleMania 39. And the fact that Lesnar rather work with Omos, a green guy who's over 7 foot tall, that's barely mobile in the ring, speaks to everything you need to know about. I mean, this story is multiple layers. I'm going to try to stay away from the Bray part because that's a story from another time. This just speaks to how badly Bray has flopped in his return, that even a guy like Lesnar, who's getting paid a shitload of money, is like, nah, I'd rather not work with him.
Yeah, that says a lot that he would. I think this plays into the back half of what we're going to talk about too, is the fact that when I see a guy, one, it's really showing you how he feels about Bray. Like, and probably a lot of people in the company don't want to be put with Bray, because let's be honest, that Bray storyline, it's gone nowhere. It's a bunch of nonsense. And I love Bray, but it's just lost me. But it also speaks to, if he's willing to just take a match with Omos, you're not trying to build that guy into the next guy. He's not the next guy. We all know he's not going to be the next Lesnar. It's not some Hangman Moxley situation where let's get him up to my level. This is a one-off big guy attraction match. And to me, him wanting that over Bray tells me that he doesn't really care, and he's out. He's got 1 foot out of the company. That's what it feels like to me. Like, I'm going to be gone anyways. So that's.
Yeah. So you mentioned him leaving, and PW Insider reported earlier in the week that he was saying farewell to some people and that he was, quote, finishing up. Obviously, it remains to be seen if Brock is hanging up the boots for good. We don't know if he's done, but his time in the ring might be done but obviously if they really want him, Saudi Arabia really wants him. He's been that guy who's almost been this mercenary for the WWE brand. Just bring in, do your bidding, and go on with whatever booking. And he's been willing to do a lot. Obviously, his line is he doesn't want to work the Pitch Black Mountain Dew match, but other than that, he's willing to do whatever it takes. He'll put guys over. He'll sell. He's been one of the better guys as far as giving back. Obviously, money aside, you look at the guys that he's been selling for. He's done a great job. I was looking forward to potentially having a Gunther match with Lesnar.
That's what I was wanting.
The IC title has been missing from his repertoire, his resume. I think it would have been cool to tell that story about having him, because he jumped from obviously a relatively unknown to the main event immediately in 2002, winning the King of the Ring and all that. So he never had time to be in the mid card, but it would have been a cool moment for the IC title to be first and foremost in center. I'm not saying have Lesnar beat him, or it would have been cool either way, having Lesnar versus Gunther in that moment.
But see, that's a match with him and Gunther. That seems like a match where I buy in, like Brock's elevating this guy, because Gunther to me is that's a main event guy.
Yeah.
I know he's with the IC belt, but that is a main event heel. I could see him working a program with Cody Rhodes when Cody wins the title. Like, and for him to go over in a Lesnar match, that would be like a, hey, I'm going to reach my hand down and pull you up to where I am type of situation. Almost is not that.
So the other piece to this is, as well, is maybe he's getting the bug for something different, and I'll let you speak to it about the UFC stuff.
I mean, as soon as the whole rumor of him finishing up kind of started percolating, around the same, like right before that, there was just a little bit of scuttlebutt in the mixed martial arts community about maybe he's coming back, maybe for a super fight. I'm not saying he's going to sign a 10 fight deal. You know, Brock doesn't need to do that. He could come back for 1 or 2 fights. And then Mr. John Jones, Johnny Bones, the newly crowned this past weekend, he came back. He was a light heavyweight his entire career, arguably one of the greatest of all time, comes back after a 3-year hiatus and wins the heavyweight title. And he's giving an interview, and they ask him, you know, do you have, it's the same question that MJF was asked that we played. Do you have any dream opponents? And this is what John Jones said.
Who would your ultimate fantasy fight be? I think fighting Brock Lesnar would have been really cool. You know, Brock isn't the most technical guy, but he has a massive fan base. He's a lot bigger than me, and it would have been one of those really cool kind of David and Goliath situations. It would have been really cool for cross-sport promoting, and I think we both would have done great things for our family and for our team. You know, financially, that would have been massive.
I would watch that. That'd be a good fight.
It's not, never say never, Brock. If you're out there,
That's true.
And you know, Brock he's a lot of things, and I feel like he gets a lot of good credit. One of the best sellers. He's a lot of things. A lot of people call him a bunch of different things, but one of the things he doesn't get enough credit for is he is a hell of a businessman.
Yeah.
He has Vince McMahon and Dana White both on speed dial. Both of those guys love him, and this happens every Mania season. I feel like he starts putting the feelers out, and he starts bidding wars, and they bid. And I think UFC is going to be bidding a lot for him, because a John Jones, Brock Lesnar one-off match would do gangbusters for the UFC. I think Lesnar's close to being out of WWE. I don't think he likes a regime without Vince at the top.
Yeah, as far as Lesnar being done, I don't know if we'll ever have that boots in the ring type of moment. I think the book will never be closed on Lesnar until he's physically unable to do it. I think money speaks, and I think even if he takes a 3-4 year break, he may just be like, you know what, Saudi princes want me to come back. I think I'm going to do some business. Like, I don't think it means.
I'm with you. That's a good take.
We've seen interviews from him. You know, even, most notably the Broken Skull interview with Stone Cold, where he doesn't think about wrestling the same way we think about wrestling. He doesn't look at it in the same scope of what he's accomplished. He doesn't have his titles hanging in his house. He doesn't really give a shit. It's just a job to him. And it's about family and farming and everything he does outdoors. And, you know, he doesn't think of it that way. He just thinks about one-offs. And he said it himself. It just like, and it rubbed people the wrong way because it feels like he doesn't have the respect or the passion for the business. It's just, it just doesn't resonate with him the same way. And I think that also works in his benefit, because he can just put things in single boxes, and he's not thinking long-term as far as, that's why he's so willing to put a guy like Seth over, or Roman, or guy go out there. And he gives a lot. Like, he doesn't have to, and I'm sure he has a lot in his booking. You have to do that. So.
No, yeah, I think you're dead on. I mean, I think he could always come back for the big payday. He could always come back for a Mania, get a massive payday. He is that type of guy. I think he respects the business. I think he upholds kind of those old school rules that Undertaker passed down to him. But as far as like being a pro wrestler to his core, I think it's a business. He respects the business, but it's, hey, I'm wanting to go home and hunt. I'm wanting to go home and fish, be with the kids. But I do think he's also one of those kind of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I think he's a simple guy. And I think massive change, doesn't scare him, but I think it's one of those things where it's like more trouble than what it's worth. He knows Vince. He's done business with Vince for a long, long time. And now there's this other regime there. And I think it's like, do I want to deal with that? I don't know. I don't know if he does. I don't know what him and Triple H, what their relationship's like, but the way he reacted when Vince stepped down, that's a big telltale sign of how he feels, you know?
Absolutely. And obviously we'll hear more about Brock down the line, and we'll keep you guys updated here on Wrestling Tonight from week to week. But I think it's time to get into our quick hitters and talk about everything going on in the world of wrestling.
Let's do it.
There we go. I fed to the bumper the correct way. So let's go with the first story here. And MLW brought in the Second Gear crew. And on this past week's episode of MLW Underground, our boy Matthew Justice and the One Called Manders made their debut appearance, which they bailed out Mance Warner out of jail for hitting Enzo with a car. Some sports entertainment stuff going on here. They are your boys. I'll let you speak to it. MLW doing some big things, bringing in some interesting characters.
I think this is great. They're bringing in guys who have a lot of support on the independent scene. We've seen Second Gear crew tearing it up over a bunch of promotions, mainly when I think Second Gear Crew, though, I think of Game Changer Wrestling. It's an indie faction. You got Matt Justice, obviously, one called Manders and Mance Warner in there, but there's also members, you've got Effie, AJ Gray, and even AEW and ROH's Eddie Kingston is one of those founding members. So this is a very beloved independent faction. And I think MLW making this decision to bring him in is smart business because it gives you a wrinkle that you're getting a lot of interesting guys that have a hardcore following, and you're elevating your product by having them in a segment.
So we speak about bringing in, but sometimes bringing people out. MJF was teasing leaving AEW to go to WWE to an anonymous talent. And obviously this is all he said, she said type of stuff here in the dirt sheets. But Fightful reported that one anonymous WWE talent outright admitted that MJF said, and I quote, "I'm looking forward to being there in 2024, before cautioning that they take what he says with a grain of salt, maybe salt of the earth, Chad." But clearly WWE's interested. I know that you've been like pounding the drum saying you believe he's already locked in long-term with AEW. Maybe this is just him just playing the game, getting his name out there and continuing to create the buzz, because we saw FTR do it, and FTR at the end of the day wound up staying. MJF storyline, it's very circular as far as Summer of Punk goes. I know he's a big fan of bringing in the history of wrestling we've seen in his programs. Even at the Scrum this last night, he was bringing in Punk quotes and he's saying, "I'm best in the world," whatever. I think that they really want to create this, whether it's true or not, this narrative that he potentially could leave with the AEW championship come 2024. And that's important to what they're telling. And I think he's probably planting seeds, even if it's not true.
Yeah, he's not going anywhere. Him and Tony Khan are like this. I think they're buddies. I think they're the closest of friends. And I'll say it again. He's locked up, man. This is all just bullshit for the journos out there, for the dirt sheets. I think he's locked up tight for a while.
So we also have we talk about kayfabe and blurring the line of reality. We have Seth Rollins spoke on Logan Paul during a recent interview on the After the Bell podcast. He talked about how Logan Paul compares to other celebrities in wrestling history. He talks about really the most interesting thing he said, kayfabe or not, was very telling. And we'll get into the first thing. He considers Logan Paul a tourist, but he also said that's a little bit different. There are obvious advantages to having people from outside of our world come into our world. And this is Seth speaking. He said, Logan Paul is not a new phenomenon. We've been doing this in WWE for decades, and we're going to continue to do it for a long time after Logan Paul is gone. He mentioned Rock and Wrestling Connection. He mentioned Cyndi Lauper. He mentioned Muhammad Ali, Liberace, talking about bringing in celebrities is what WrestleMania was built on. And he also compared his run to Lawrence Taylor and how Lawrence Taylor never claimed to be the best wrestler when obviously he main evented against Bam Bam Bigelow, one of the worst WrestleManias of all time, WrestleMania 11.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. So I'll ask your take first before we get into what he says to really top off and put like the icing on the cake of this interview. Obviously, this is in character, right? This is all building towards the match at WrestleMania.
Yeah, he's definitely selling us. I think he deep down at his core, though, I think he believes a lot of what he's saying. He's an indie guy. Tyler Black, baby. That's what I love about Rollins. People forget he's been in that system for so long, but you forget he's just as indie as the most indie-rific guys in AEW. And I think Rollins kind of waves that flag quietly that, hey, I support the independents. Even back to GCW, when they had their collective, he was there. There were shots that came out of him in kind of behind the curtain watching these matches. Dude loves indie wrestling. And I love that he said this because it's the same way I feel. There's a place, because in that quote, he says, there's a place, like you said, the Muhammad Ali's, the Cyndi Laupers, there is a place for that. The Mike Tyson's, Shot of Nostalgia, season 3, you guys are talking about it. There's a place for that. But Seth goes on to say, it's a different beast when you start getting these people in the ring on a semi-regular basis. And I agree. At that point, it becomes novelty. At that point, you are taking minutes away from guys who this is what they do. Like, I think it's a little bit of both. I do think a lot of this is coming from the heart, but I think the majority of it is, hey, let's sell Mania.
So the main pull from this interview is, and I highlighted in our notes here, he says that if everyone follows the Logan Paul model, the wrestling business is dead. And he said, and I quote, in the Logan Paul situation, I don't understand what long-term value he's going to be able to give back to us. It's one thing if you come in, do your thing and leave, but this dude has a contract with WWE. He's supposed to have a few matches a year. That doesn't make you an ambassador for the business. That's not what wrestling is. I don't want my students, I don't want the next generation coming up and thinking that's how you make it in wrestling. If everyone follows that model, as I said before, the business is dead. So like you said, they're using this outlet to build the match at WrestleMania, but there's got to be some truth to it because he is a guy who has his own wrestling school. He's trying to build the fundamentals of how to do this. You don't start from the top. You don't build a Instagram, social media presence, YouTube phenomenon, and then get in the ring. There's got to be a piece of him among other people that feel a certain way. Talent aside, like the one thing they're missing from this is you talk about Lawrence Taylor, the WrestleMania moment he wasn't anywhere near the talent that Logan Paul brings to the ring. This dude is made for wrestling, whether people like him or not. He is undeniable. Like the match with Roman speaks for itself. They're going to tear it up at WrestleMania. It has the chance to be the match of the night.
Oh, he's beyond talented. That's where it gets squirrely. You can't hate on Logan, but you can hate on, he didn't put his time in on the indies. He didn't, pay his dues. He didn't have to. His celebrity did get him to the dance, but when he showed up to the dance, he cut the fucking rug, man. Like he's out there putting on incredible performances. But you got to give me a little more than just showing up at the big shows and having a match. Like if you want me to take you serious long-term, you got to show up more than what you are. And I think, the quote you read from Seth, that just hits on, I do think, he waves that indie flag. And I think what he said right there is there's a lot of truth in it.
So we also have Jeff Jarrett in the news is talking about his details of backstage work with AEW, and you mentioned the word squirrely. He's being a little squirrely with this.
Yeah.
And he said, speaking with the French entertainment site Catch News, Jarrett skirted around the subject of his responsibilities backstage. We do know, we spoke about it in depth all over the tavern, that he holds the title Director of Business Development. And then Jarrett said in the interview, AEW is a privately held company, and what I do is I develop business, and I think when the world needs to know something we developed, we'll let it out. But respectfully and candidly, but diplomatically, we'll tell you when we're ready to tell you. Very weird. I mean, there's ways to say what you're doing, and I don't know why he's holding so close to the chest, but maybe there's things out there that he doesn't want to say. And I don't know. He's been more of an in-ring talent as of late, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think he's, I think he's just being smart, man. He's not wanting to speak on something and then it not come to pass because he does have his dad in him, rest in peace to his late father, who was a hell of a businessman as well. And, say what you want about Jeff Jarrett. He did manage to create a company that's still going today. TNA, Impact Wrestling, like that came out of the Jarretts. So the guy can get it. He has business contacts within the world of pro wrestling. And I didn't mind him being kind of vague about it, but I think they're putting work in. I think there's going to be some big things coming.
We also have Naomi, real name Trinity Fatu. She obviously has been gone from WWE. She's been the side topic of the Mercedes Moné stuff, but she also left on that day. She'll be making her first appearance publicly in capacity of pro wrestling during WrestleMania 39 weekend at WrestleCon, which is going to be Saturday, April 1st and Sunday, April 2nd. During a signing for the Golden Ring Collectibles recently, Ariane Andrew, which is former wrestler WWE Cameron, was asked about Fatu's pro wrestling future. And Andrew said Fatu's recovering from shoulder surgery, which we haven't really heard that she was hurt. Obviously, we wouldn't. She's not involved in any company. This is private business on her end. Obviously, she is part of wrestling landscape. I know she probably still has the itch to get involved. Where do you see Naomi going? Is this just is this her making a quick buck with wrestling fans in the area for that weekend, or is it something this is a precursor to her getting involved back in whatever promotion wants her?
She's a hard read for me because a part of me, when you have a significant other in another company, you're always like, they'll probably just end up there again. I wouldn't be shocked if she went back to WWE, but at the same time, like, I do feel like her and Mercedes are trying to make a statement like that we're not just going to go back after we feel wronged, even though Vince has supposedly stepped down. Who knows now? Because word is he's at Raw tonight. So I wouldn't be shocked if she showed up in AEW either. With this Outsiders storyline, you don't know how far they're going to go with that. Naomi could easily pop in. Mercedes could easily pop in. Who knows? I think with Naomi, I think it's very up in the air right now. It's very, I don't have a read on where she lands.
We also have Keith Lee in the news here, and he's been really going viral with his interesting looks on Rampage and Dynamite. And he has the new look, and he said he's ready to show everyone why it's just the beginning of something special. And part of the look was going all natural with the gray hair. He's wearing some wizard cloak, and we'll get into what that means. But he says, and I quote, "This is definitely the same Keith Lee that left." All right. That Keith Lee that left is actually not the entirety of what Keith Lee is. I think what was inspired that look and return and all that. I think in previous interview, the exact terminology I used was a giant middle finger to society and a lot of companies that want you, that want you need to look like, a lot of people that tell you what you need to look like. And I decided to say, okay, here's reality. So he has gray hair. He's heavy to say the least. I mean, he's a big boy. Good for him, showing he's comfortable in his own skin. I don't know. Keith Lee's booking has been strange in AEW. When he first came over, if you go back to Black and Gold NXT Keith Lee, where he was booked as the double champion, that moment he had, man, that guy looked like he was a future transcendent star. How far are we fallen from that moment? I'm glad that he's comfortable in his own skin. I feel good for the human being Keith Lee. But that, I think the boat has sailed away. Like, we're waiting on the shore. Like, hey, come back. I don't think it's ever returning.
I don't see him being that transcendent main event guy. I just don't. I think there's a hitch in him, and this is all just from a fan perspective. I don't know shit what goes on in the locker room, but just from 30,000 feet, it looks like there's something in him where he doesn't play ball. There's something in him, and I mean from a character standpoint. I feel like people do there's got to be guys that try to give him things to do or how to change up, but he's always the same. He's always, I know it's easy. Everyone always craps on his the way he speaks, his demeanor. He's never went away from that. It's like you're digging your heels in like, give us another look. I'm not saying change who you are. Just give us another look. And we never get that. So it leads me to believe he doesn't play ball when it comes to character work.
So his clothing is based off people familiar with the franchise Tekken, the character Leroy Smith. So he's trying to bring that approach into it. And we know Kenny Omega likes to bring in the anime and the video game spin. So if you probably recognize this coat and all that stuff, it was relatable to Tekken. Not much of a Tekken guy myself. So it just came off as like he was being like a outer space minister. That's what it came off
he was
as.
Like a sci-fi preacher to me.
Yeah, pretty much. So we also have the WWE King and Queen of the Ring premium live event. We mentioned last week that it's coming back, but to our chagrin here, it's going to take place in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Just another event that they're going to be having there. So any sort of momentum we had, sort of feeling good about these events, seems like it's just going to be similar to the Greatest Royal Rumble, the Super Showdown.
Get used to it.
It's just it was disheartening to see this event happening in Saudi Arabia, because I thought it had some momentum to really bridge that gap to get it to SummerSlam and have some momentum building across the summer. But no, it's going to be in Saudi Arabia and feel like, bring all your stars and whoever the Saudi princes want to see, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, get used to it. I feel like there's going to be more and more events there when they buy the company.
We mentioned Dax Harwood, who made his return last night at Revolution. On his podcast, he says a lot of things and he's very honest, which I do appreciate on his end. he talked about being labeled difficult to work with. And there's a lot of quote here, but he said, and I quote, most important thing, the ways they used to that paint is they go to the dirt sheets and they anonymously say, oh, he's unhappy and he's difficult to work with. No, I just want the best for my career and for Cash's career too. And, you know, I've always wondered why. Like, I've never gotten to any kind of, I've argued with Tony, I've argued with Bruce, I've argued before with Vince, Mark Carrano, I've argued with these guys, but not to the point where, you know, it was like, your mom's a bitch, you know what I mean? So he goes off for a while. You guys can listen to Dax talk about it. And again, this is like, there's something admirable about him going on a podcast and not just using corporate speak to blend what he believes. It feels like he's as honest as possible. And that's going to rub people the wrong way no matter what, because no matter, you know, we're on here talking right now. There's someone listening. We're rubbing the wrong way. AEW marks they're, whatever. It doesn't matter. You're going to, if you're speaking your truth, you're going to piss someone off. And there's something genuine about Dax that I love. That maybe if that was me, I probably wouldn't have a podcast until post-career, because it just lends itself to have too many controversies with people that there's going to be uncomfortable topics that come up. I would wait till after your career, but that's his prerogative, and he's well-deserved, and he's as talented as ever. And this is what he wants to do. And like I said, the honesty is it's admirable, because there's a lot of people in the wrestling business that don't have the ability to be as candid as he is on a weekly basis.
It's one of the best podcast listens right now, in my opinion, because of his genuine nature on the show. And having spoken with Dax before, him and Cash are real dudes, man. There's no rock star bullshit with them. They are real guys. I totally relate to those dudes. I think they are great for pro wrestling.
He also said, too, before we move on from this, he said, you know, in this industry, it seems like if you try to be better or try to better yourself or try to better your position, you do without being a backstabber, and you did it face to face, man, you're labeled as difficult to work with or unhappy. Very, very telling, because wrestling, we hear all the stories about the behind the scenes and use it the cloak and dagger or whatever your phrase you use. That's what it usually is. Yep. He puts his feelings on Front Street, and that's why people say he's difficult to work with. And like I said, you know, he has a platform and he's using it to get his voice out there. And that's, again, his right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he's speaking the truth. He is just speaking at least his truth. And that's all I need. Give me your truth and I can sort the other shit out.
Well, Bryan Danielson spoke his truth. He was talking about his favorite part of his WWE career. And I think it might've surprised people. And he said it was the Kofi Mania thing. He spoke about this on The Ringer, which obviously culminated in his match with Kofi at WrestleMania 35 at MetLife Stadium in Jersey. Danielson was obviously a heel. He was doing the whole, you know, recyclable thing, the Earth
Planet's champion
situation. And he talks about how the whole thing was magic. And he did go on to talk about how he was disheartened to see Kofi get squashed by Lesnar. But interesting to see that Bryan Danielson's favorite moment in all of WWE wasn't WrestleMania 30 with him going out on top. It was him giving Kofi that moment. It just speaks to the individual, the human being of Bryan Danielson and what his mindset of wrestling is. We talked about giving back to a guy like MJF last night, but you know, his favorite part of WWE was giving back to Kofi Kingston.
Yeah, I think we're seeing who he is in AEW too. Like, it's not going to shock me if he never holds the world title in AEW. It is not going to shock me. I don't think he wants it.
Right. I think the only shot we had of that happening was the interim championship with Moxley. Then that's been gone. So
yep.
I'm sure they argued in the back where they're like, no, you win, no, you win, no, you win. That's probably what happened. But we had Britt Baker speaking on the Brawl Out during an interview with Brandon Walker. He's from the Barstool Sports Network. And
I have that clip if you want to.
Yeah, let's pop it on there so we can hear what she said.
Anything in the world and has so much pride, and at a time when it felt like we were really like something special, and we had some of the biggest names in professional wrestling all like fighting for our same team, and especially after a huge pay-per-view. That pay-per-view was amazing. It was one of the biggest houses we ever had. That scrum was heartbreaking, and it was embarrassing, and it was disappointing because it just felt like, and for a moment in time, this felt like a very much a disaster. And I think the scrums are really cool because it's after a pay-per-view and you get to speak to these wrestlers and there's a lot of emotion, and they get to talk to you about what's going on in the ring, what they're feeling, their storylines. And in a way, it kind of, it humanizes these very larger than life wrestlers. But that time needs to be used proactively and responsibly, because I can sit here, and if I sit here and do nothing but tell you everybody I hate, everything that I'm mad at, or let's go through all the Twitter lies about me and debunk them all, like that's not proactive, and that would be selfish of me to use your time and the world's time like that.
Sure.
I would rather, let's put over this freaking pay-per-view, else going awesome in AEW. And is that other stuff there? Of course. Are there people here I don't like? Of course. Are there things I don't like? Of course. But I'm still a soldier for AEW, and I'm on the front lines. I'm fighting for my team, and I'm going to put it over. We weren't there. I wasn't there. You weren't there. So that will be that. But what I can say is AEW is still a special place. And when maybe that was a little, wrinkle in the fabric, but we ironed it out, and we're still a super strong company, a super strong a family.
Yeah, that's the type of stuff. If you want Punk back into the fabric of AEW, you have to overcome that. Like, that's the feeling. And she's saying that publicly. So imagine what people are saying privately about that situation.
Oh yeah, when she says, you can't. You got to use your time smartly at a scrum and not just go into airing all of your grievances. So, there was a lot of veiled shit in that directed at Punk's side, I believe, because
100%.
she spoke very highly of the Bucks. It's like, hey, AEW wouldn't be AEW without the Jacksons and Omega. It just wouldn't.
Yeah, and we'll certainly hear more about that, but it is interesting to see all these dribs and drabs of other people speaking about it over time. You can obviously make a full movie on this that will continue to talk about it for years to come. But Tony Khan, we saw Commander's debut on AEW Dynamite last week, and everyone was excited about it. But allegedly, he was the second choice because we wanted to have El Hijo del Vikingo to make his debut. He wasn't available. We saw Vikingo work GCW this week, and he crushed that match. Holy shit. If you haven't seen that match, go out and watch Vikingo. The things that kid can do in the ring is unbelievable. But Meltzer notes that Commander wasn't under contract with AEW when he was put on Dynamite. Commander is currently under contract with the Mexican promotion Chaos. He's on WWE's radar. I'm sure he's back on AEW's radar. A nice little, I guess, silver lining of not getting what you want. Commander showed out on Dynamite. Big fan of Commander, one of the best luchas in wrestling, if not the best right now. He can do different things, and I've spoken his praises on and on again, so he deserves the love. But, I think we're going to see more of Commander on a national platform, and well-deserved. Yeah,
it looks like he's wanted. He's the belle of the ball right now. All the major companies want him. That's a great place to be as a young talent.
Yeah, I mean, it has me clamoring for maybe a Vikingo match in AEW as well, to know that Tony Khan wanted to have him debut in a ladder match. Imagine what Vikingo can do in a ladder match, to do hitting that 630 fucking, oh my God, cannonball.
Seems like they've had a little bit of issues with AAA and sharing talent. So I would love to see Vikingo there, but we'll see how that shakes out.
So we also had talk about Impact's Tyler Valkyrie finishing up at Impact soon. So we're not sure exactly where she's going to wind up going, but there's heavy interest from other companies as of late. Obviously the big two, WWE and AEW. Valkyrie is a big piece of the MLW women's division. She is a very talented wrestler that, so wherever she winds up going, she's going to add to their roster. And obviously she's part of the fabric of what MLW was trying to do, but interesting that she's moving away and she's going towards maybe not working Mexican dates, working MLW. She wants more of a consistent North American platform like AEW or WWE. To me, she fits a little bit of what WWE is doing, but I'd be surprised to see her, think about going anywhere else.
Yeah, she's been tearing it up, popping up in Impact, popping up MLW, NWA. I think she's wanting to lock in on somebody. She had the run with NXT, didn't really work out. She got released in those massive cuts, but I wouldn't mind seeing, she's a great veteran to have in the locker room. I really wouldn't mind seeing her in AEW's women's division. I think it would It would be a good place for her. I think she could be more of herself and not have to, fit in. She's a vet, man. She's been doing it a long time, but I'm excited to see where she goes, because she's a fun star out there that needs a big time home.
Yeah, so she's right now, they have to figure out the championship belts. Right now, she's the AAA Reina de Reinas champion. She's also the MLW World Women's Featherweight champion. So she has to get those titles off her. And AAA doesn't give a shit, obviously. They could just figure out to strip them. We've seen it happen in the past. But the MLW World Women's Featherweight Championship has to be figured out and figure out who's going over. Her title defenses haven't been announced yet, but I'd imagine that she's finishing up working in that quote-unquote territory, that they're going to figure out a way to put someone else over, maybe Billy Starks, maybe somebody else to carry that weight. I know she just beat Billy Starks a couple of weeks ago, so maybe it's her or somebody else. But Valkyrie will be missing MLW, and they're trying to do big things with the Reels deal and trying to whatever it is, a third, fourth promotion level with AEW and WWE. Losing her hurts, but I think she's obviously looking at greener pastures, potentially going back to WWE as a missed opportunity. She was furloughed, as you mentioned, so I think she's probably like, all right, if they're interested in me, let me try this one more time, start my NXT, maybe main roster run, and see where it goes.
Yeah.
We also had a trio of UK wrestling stars at the Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. So we had UK veterans Shea Samuels, Jason Mason, and Rampage Brown spending 2 weeks working with the roster at the Performance Center. As we know, Samuels and Brown are former WWE NXT UK superstars, while Mason worked as a trainer at the Performance Center in London. So interesting to see that they're using some of these British strong style guys on the brand, and they're obviously trying to launch this NXT Europe thing that we saw way back in the day. They're trying to build up this brand. Obviously, we've seen NXT UK go to the wayside. We're not seeing too much of it. Yeah, this was cool to see that they're dipping into the talent pool and their resources to help the younger generation. This was awesome to see. You see seminars, one-offs, and things like that, but really cool to see them giving back to the business and giving back to WWE.
Yeah, Rampage Brown was in some. I watched him a few times in NXT UK, so it's good to give back at the PC.
We had Brett Lauderdale talking about getting Kota Ibushi, and the biggest thing with this is everyone thought it came together so easily, and they were wondering why. But apparently, the reason why Brett Lauderdale was able to get Kota Ibushi so easily was his connection with Josh Barnett. And the quote said, "The simple fact of the matter here is that Kota Ibushi is friends with someone that works very closely with GCW. Josh Barnett has had a close relationship with Kota Ibushi for many years. Those two met up on Josh's most recent trip to Japan and kind of discussed Kota's pending free agency and what he was interested in doing. He's always enjoyed Bloodsport. He liked the show concept and idea, and he told Josh he'd like to do it. And pretty much Josh Barnett was the guy who facilitated the deal. And there we have Kota Ibushi, WrestleMania weekend in GCW. Awesome.
I love Josh Barnett, man. He's a good dude too. If you ever hear him on podcasts, very interesting guy. Absolute world beater in the MMA scene, tough as nails, and a consummate fan and ambassador for pro wrestling. So love that he made this connection for Lauderdale.
You guys can check it out on the Collective for Kota Ibushi. They're going to tear it up. So make sure you guys check out Bloodsport. It's always an interesting take on professional wrestling with an MMA spin to it as well. So it's pretty cool. We also, speaking of MMA, Ronda Rousey is reportedly suffering from a legitimate injury. Her WrestleMania 39 status is in question. She's not expected to miss the pay-per-view due to the injury, but there's no word exactly when she'll be medically cleared. At this point, Chad, we have Ronda and Shayna Baszler expected to challenge the Women's Tag Team Championships against Lita and Becky Lynch, maybe with a triple threat with former champions Dakota Kai and Io Sky. Ronda has been wildly disappointing on this second run, to say the least, and it's kind of crazy to think how far her star has fallen since that big moment when she put Steph in the armbar at WrestleMania, and then even main eventing where she put Becky over. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, the glimmer is off of her for me.
The bloom is off the rose.
The bloom is off the rose. Yeah, because I just don't care about this tag match. I don't care about Ronda. I'm just not bought in. It all seems like an act. I can't buy into her. I just not interested.
Eddie Edwards will be remaining with Impact for the foreseeable future. So he's 39 years old, and he said he signed a new deal with the promotion. PW Insider reported this on Friday. Eddie Edwards has, believe it or not, been with Impact since January 2014 when he debuted alongside Davey Richards as the Wolves. He's very decorated Impact. He's going to be staying there and potentially ending his career there. He's a big piece of what they're doing. So Eddie Edwards is going to be in Impact for a long period of time. And we don't know the exact details of this, but I think foreseeable future speaks a lot to what they're doing there.
I love stuff like this. For companies like that, I love when you have those just stalwarts that's like, this is my company. This is where my history is, and I'm going to own my history and be someone this company can rely on. It's kind of like when Moxley came out and said, I'm building AEW. I'm not going anywhere. You need for smaller companies outside of WWE, you need those guys. You can't just always be cycling in people. You need those stalwarts. And Eddie that's what he is to Impact, man. You know, the Wolves with Davey Richards, they crushed it. He's been a lot of things for Impact Wrestling. He is one of their most valuable players for sure.
Speaking of valuable players, the most valuable player in AEW right now is set to appear on the next episode of Impractical Jokers. His appearance was filmed last summer at a mall. And it's going to be on TBS and True TV's airing. And obviously this is a huge deal. 10 p.m. Eastern time on Thursdays. I'll be airing March 9th of this week. We've seen Impractical Jokers. They're big wrestling fans. Interesting to see what they'll do with MJF and how he he's not breaking kayfabe. So how are they getting his heel persona to be amplified on the show?
I love it. I love that they're doing the cross pollination with other Warner Media, Warner Discovery. I love it, man. And Impractical Jokers, I'm a big fan of those guys. I think they're good dudes.
We have the premiere date for AEW All Access has been revealed, March 29th at 10 p.m., which is a Wednesday following Dynamite, immediately following the show. This will be on a full inclusive look about what goes on behind the scenes, everything but the brawl out, pretty much.
It looked like they teased it, though, a little bit.
A little bit. I just have really no interest in things like this. I mean, I don't know. They need so much. They need another hour of programming as far as their in-ring goes, and they're like, it's All Access. We're going to get stuff from behind the scenes. I don't know.
Yeah, but this isn't for us. I mean, it is for us, but this is the shit that pulls people in.
Fuck the casual fan, though, as you say.
I'm with you. I fly that fuck the casual fan flag. I'm with you, but
we need a merch with that, by the way.
Yeah, we do. We do. But I'm a mark for shit like this, man. Me and Sneed, we're when they had Total Divas season 1, I was all over it just for the fact of I've watched wrestling my whole life, and now we're going to see. I know it's all staged horse shit. It's not about that. It's about seeing what the backstage looks like. What's the area look like? Where the seamstress is at. I just love seeing kind of like, we all know it's staged again, but
you like seeing where the sausage is made. I get it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I am. I'm excited to see what they show because it did look a little more docu sports drama than reality TV bullshit, you know?
Maybe it was just me setting the expectation of what the announcement would be because it said it's game changing, it's revolutionary, and I was like, really, a reality show? But yeah. I guess we'll see how it is. I'll remain open minded.
I'll say this. I think in today's day and age, it's easy to just pan it off as all just another reality show. But the entire reason the UFC is where it is right now, the reason it is a global phenomenon that sold for $4 billion to Endeavor is because they had a show called The Ultimate Fighter. And that show made people who did not give a shit about fighting tune in. And that blew the sport up. That's when you saw mass exodus from pro wrestling fans jumping on to UFC, and it was all started with a reality TV show. I'm not saying that's going to happen here, but there is growth in that shit.
There's a good point for sure. We also have the pre-trial hearing set for the GCW star G Raver. He has drug and DUI charges that are up there. So April 13th in Pennsylvania would be the pre-trial hearing. G Raver was arrested back in December 2022. He was slouched inside his car. Authorities allege that Brendan Graver admitted he snorted, and I quote, 10 bags of heroin. He was given Narcan after being taken into custody. So G Raver's right now out on bail, Chad, but one of his last matches in February 2022 is when him and Orin Vate were defeated by the Rejects in a tag team death match at GCW, Believe Me. We see Nick Gage is involved in wrestling, so it wouldn't shock me to see G Raver make his return after all this clears up. So
yeah, it's been weird. G Raver was kind of a cornerstone of GCW booking for a while. It's been odd not seeing him. He's got a crazy, unique look. Hopefully he gets his shit together and figures it out.
We have Cody Rhodes dropping a reference to the All In during the promo with Roman. And this was awesome to hear because he was talking about overcoming. Roman is that guy who's larger than life, and he's a guy that cannot be defeated. And he said, and I quote, "There's no way that 10,000 people would pay to see me and my buddy's little indie show. And ever since then, the goalposts have continuously moved, and I continuously punched it through the uprights." Awesome dose of reality that they included in this promo. You felt it. And Roman's reaction, the camera panned in on Roman's face when he said it. Awesome stuff. I pop for it.
Yeah, I love stuff. I mean, that's catnip for pro wrestling fans. You love shit like that.
We have AEW's faction, unfortunately for Hawk. The factory has disbanded. This was highly criticized, as we know. No more after QT Marshall replies to a tweet about the group. And the tweet says, "We did some fun stuff. Unfortunately, the amount of factory hate from the experts in the wrestling was too much, and the group had to disband, but keep your eyes on." And they put all the guys in there: Shoddy Lee, Cole Carter, Aaron Solo. And who's Mr. Freak Beast? Who's
Nick Camarado.
Oh, Camarado. That's right.
It just cracks me up that this faction got so much heat, and the heat calls them to disband. Fine. It's like the fans bitching. It worked, fans. It worked.
I met the All Out weekend, and they were very nice.
Yeah, very, very nice guys.
All right, so we have Gunther was dismissing the notion that the Imperium gimmick has anything to do with fascism. So I'll let you take the lead on this, Chad, and tell us about what Gunther was saying.
Yeah, he was on Cheap Heat with Peter Rosenberg, and he kind of asked about, that stigma, because if you remember, he had the stigma of being named after a Nazi submarine commander, Gunther Stark. They renamed him from his name that I love, Walter. And it kind of stirred back up because the 2K23 WWE video game ratings came out, and Gunther's rating was 88. Now, I know this because I worked at a tattoo place for a while, and guys wouldn't tattoo this number. If some weirdo, dickhead came in wanting this, 88 is kind of a white supremacist dog whistle for Heil Hitler. H, it's the 8th letter of the alphabet, so 88. So people brought that up, and they changed the rating. Gunther was kind of upset about it, but Rosenberg asked him about the criticism of his gimmick being fascist related, because let's be honest, I mean, there is a very stormtrooper imperial jackboot thug vibe to Imperium. I love that, though. I think it's cool. It's a great villain thing. And he said, that's the history with the two companies or the two countries, talking about Germany and Austria. He's like, that's something we can never change. We have to live with it. But obviously that's something that got thrown at us before and still gets thrown at us. We don't really acknowledge it because it's so far away from what the truth is. And often I also blame it on people seeing the first obvious thing and jumping on it. It doesn't represent the culture in our countries either. Austria and Germany have made huge efforts to be hard on themselves when it comes to their history and keep themselves in check. I agree. Like, I don't think it's them pushing any agenda or anything like that, but what's wrong with playing a heel and taking little things from history? I get it's a little sensitive because that's where he's from, but I don't buy that there's no inspiration from the aesthetics. I'm not saying the ideology they're pushing, but the aesthetics of that big black fucking coat he wears. And there's some aesthetics there that's very fascist. It just is. I mean, if you know your history, come on, guys, don't treat us like we're stupid. But I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I
Right.
like pulling from history.
So this is like Control C, Control V every week on here. MLW is expected to file a new lawsuit against WWE this week. So there's been antitrust lawsuits. WWE had that thing dismissed in court over a month ago. MLW had 21 days to appeal it and amend it. Court bar is expected to file again against WWE. Additionally, this be considered a different lawsuit than the original. This is pretty much because of MLW's lawsuits happens to coincide with the uncertainty surrounding its TV deal with Reels based on moving to Peacock, and MLW can't work on Peacock with WWE being there. So it seems personal at this point that either WWE people and MLW are going out of their way to throw up fences. And it sucks for MLW because WWE has a lot more resources to fuck them over if they really wanted to. So MLW is consistently heading into hitting wall after wall when they're trying to make gains. And this real stuff feels like it's not going to happen because of the Peacock move.
It's honestly baffling to me that this is the company WWE targets to like put their thumb on, because they don't have this wide like reach. Yeah, a couple weeks ago, the Reels thing happens. We're all pumped about them getting the Reels deal so more people can see them. And then WWE gets Reels on, or Peacock brings Reels on. And now with WWE's exclusive pro wrestling content situation with Peacock, now this big monumental deal for MLW is like a moot point. So, man, the back and forth between this little company trying to become a big company and the monolith of the business, it's very intriguing to me.
If you go back to the original origin of this, the strife between them, I think it has everything to do with War Games. When WWE let the lapse in copyright go, MLW picked it up and gave them a huge fucking issue with it, and they couldn't use War Games because MLW had it. And I think they've never let it go. And they're like, we're going to squash these guys. We're not going to let them ever get one up. And I think it has to do with that.
Yeah, it's personal. There's something personal there.
We have some results to break down, so we're going to go through them quick. On AEW Dynamite, Powerhouse Hobbs won the Face of the Revolution match. Danhausen and OC won the Battle Royal to get into the tag team title match at Revolution. We missed Rampage, which was the go-home show. Claudio and Wheeler Yuta defeated Aussie Open, Top Flight, and Dark Order. Rio defeated Emi Sakura. Powerhouse Hobbs with, make sure I include this, the Golden Inner Tube defeated Serpentico. And then Keith Lee and Dustin Rhodes defeated Swerve Strickland and Parker Boudreaux, who looks increasingly worse in the ring. Parker Boudreaux looks like the shits, man. What the hell is going on?
Get that guy out of there.
On WWE Raw, Lita and Becky Lynch won the Women's Tag Team Championship, and Omos and Lesnar started their build with an MVP segment on the lounge and all that stuff. So it seems like they're going forward with it.
Yeah, man. Wow. This is what Lesnar's doing. Saddle up. It's WrestleMania season.
SmackDown Solo Sikoa defeated Sami Zayn, which I was saying this, I commented on someone's Instagram post. This sort of put the pin in, like, if Sami Zayn can't beat Solo, how the fuck is he going to beat Roman? It's just like they just showed he's never going to reach that level. And I understand Solo is undefeated, but then don't make the match. Like, Sami really can't afford to lose on these upcoming weeks. And watching him lose to Solo, I was like, I can't believe we're here at this point.
Yeah. The highlight of SmackDown for me was the face-to-face between Roman and Cody.
Oh, 100%.
Great stuff.
On NXT, we had the NXT North American Championship match. Wesley defended against Nathan Frazier successfully. We had Maiko Satomura defeated Zoe Stark, and Carmelo Hayes defeated Tyler Bate, which was a really, really good match. I haven't been a big fan of NXT. Yeah, pretty good match, though. On Impact, we had Mike Bailey defeated Shane Hayes. We had the Tag Team Championship being defended and won by Bullet Club. Ace Austin and Chris Bay defeated the Motor City Machine Guns. So a pretty good episode of Impact. This was taped in advance, so you might have seen spoilers. It's taken away from some of the appeal of Impact, but go out of your way to watch it if you have some time on Thursday night. And we also have GCW Holy Smokes. So Vikingo, as I mentioned, wrestled Alex Zane in a killer match. They went all out. Alex Zane, hot sauce, has been all over the place. Taco Bell inspired, Baja Blast, colored trim tights. Great match. We had Los Macizos defeated SAT in a tag team championship match. Jordan Oliver defeated Alex Coughlin in a JCW championship match. And then the night after a GCW Ransom, most notably, Los Macizos lost those tag team championships to the Motor City Machine Guns. 2 nights GCW crushed 2 weekends in a row. We're building up towards the Collective in LA. That's their WrestleMania.
Yeah, very interesting that Motor City Machine Guns drop the Impact titles, then pick up the GCW titles.
And Los Macizos, they've been champions for a while at this point. I mean, they had that match with SAT, they crushed it. And yeah, I mean, this is pretty cool. I like to think that Motor City is going to be having a decent run in GCW for the time being.
Yeah, Los Macizos, man, they've been crushing it for GCW. Like cornerstone of that division, really brought that division to life.
Quick question for you about GCW. Masha Slamovich has a championship shot against Nick Gage. Is there a chance they put the title on there?
I'm going to say no, because to me, if you're going to do that type of story, and I think GCW is all about doing something like that, how do you not put it on Allie Katch?
Yeah.
I mean, I love Masha. She's great. And she does have that kind of coverage because she's with Impact Wrestling too. Maybe it brings more eyes. Maybe that's the move. But when I think GCW and the woman that deserves to hold that world title, I think Allie Katch.
All I know is they need to get that title off of Nick Gage. And I forgot to mention for GCW, holy smokes, Drew Parker had his last death match, which was a really cool moment in a losing effort. So Drew Parker done with death matches forever.
Wow, that's huge, man. He was the winner of the
Tournament of Survival back in June.
Yeah, tournament. Yeah, man. Mm-hmm. I love Drew Parker.
Yeah, he cut a weird promo after saying, like, sometimes in a relationship you love someone, but it just doesn't work out. He talked about his relationship with death matches and he just can't do it anymore. And I mean, the toll it takes on your body. So I understand why, but interesting to see he's no longer doing it. He's a great wrestler aside from that. So I'm curious to see where
he's got a great look too.
Yeah. We have NW Power. We had Kenzie Page defeating Kylan King in an NWA World Women's Television Tournament qualifying match. And Bully Ray and Mike Knox had a no contest building towards wherever they're going with Bully Ray.
Man, NWA, they're doing good stuff, but man, they're just churning out titles. There are too many titles in that company right now.
In Ring of Honor, Claudio defeated AR Fox and Takeshita defeated Josh Woods. You guys can get all your Ring of Honor fix on Honor Society Thursday night, 10 p.m. following the Raw down here on Turnbuckle Tavern. We're going to be covering the Willow match against Athena and Samoa Joe versus Tony Deppen, among many matches. The pacing of Ring of Honor this week was awesome. I think there was like 10 matches back to back to back to back, and they churned out a 2-hour show that was it felt awesome. And you guys can hear us talk about it on Honor Society. And then MLW Underground, we had the world middleweight champion Linsterado and Microman defeated Delirious and Mini Abismo Negro. And Billy Starks defeated Kayla Cassidy. And we had John Hennigan defeated Davey Richards to become the new MLW National Openweight Champion. So title change on Underground. If you have Peacock, you didn't see it though.
Yeah.
So that's all for the results. Let's get into Dave's raves and talk about his match of the week.
Let's do it.
We need the drop, 2 of them, by the way. We need the drop from the match in the Iron Man match when he says, "Is that going to take a star away from me, Dave?"
Yeah, we need that drop.
And then we also need the one where he's limping around and he's like, "I might not like your fave, Kenny," with Brian Alvarez sitting right there and
laughing.
Meltzer just not. Yeah, keep laughing, dipshit. All right, so Dave's raves. His match of the week was Will Ospreay versus Luke Jacobs, February 26th in Birmingham, UK. This is under the Rev Pro umbrella, and his performer of the week was Will Ospreay. So Will Ospreay, he was my wrestler of the year. This guy turns out classics every time he's in the ring. Luke Jacobs, another guy to check out in the scene of the UK wrestling system. So if you guys are looking for new favorites, Luke Jacobs should be on your radar. We also have Dave on 60-minute Ironman matches. So he had a whole section. He kind of highlighted the history of Ironman matches, its origins. So some of the stuff I want to just touch on here, we did speak about it in the story about Revolution, but Dave said the ability to entertain a crowd for 60 minutes was considered a badge of honor in another generation, made people like Luthez, Jack Briscoe, the Funk Brothers, Ric Flair, and others into legendary performers. but those were organic 60-minute matches, which actually were very frequent for world title matches in NWA in Japan during the 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. As far as the Iron Man match itself, it's hard to know its origins. There were most falls in 30 minutes and most falls matches in the 60s. They were likely 60-minute versions as well. He said the first that we know of would have been Pat Patterson versus Ray Stevens match at the Cow Palace, not far from the Chase Center. It was set up when Patterson was champion and Stevens won one fall, and they ended up going 60 minutes. So Stevens won the match, but Patterson retained the title because under the rules of the time, to win, you had to get 2 out of 3 falls. There's more history of the Iron Man match in here. And don't tell me that Tony Khan doesn't know his history. The fact that they had MJF, Bryan Danielson, just a stone's throw away from the Cow Palace, where the first one was held with Pat Patterson, Ray Stevens, makes it feel even more special.
Yeah, that's awesome. I knew the Cow Palace was kind of the house that Pat and Ray built. I didn't know that they were considered maybe the first official Iron Man match. That's awesome.
And he went on talking about WWE's history. He said, as far as pure 60-minute Iron Man matches, WWE has had 8, WCW never had one, and AEW has never had one up until Bryan Danielson and MJF. The first was Bret Hart versus Ric Flair on January 9th, 1993 in Boston. Bret Hart had another one on July 8th, 1994 at the Meadowlands Arena with Owen Hart, and the most famous one on March 31st, 1996 as the WrestleMania main event with Shawn Michaels in Anaheim, California. Others were Triple H and The Rock. That was Judgment Day in 2000. Kurt Angle versus Lesnar, September 18th, 03 in Raleigh. Triple H Benoit, 04 in Pittsburgh. Cena versus Orton, October 25th in Pittsburgh as well. That was 09. And then we had Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa versus Adam Cole versus Finn Balor at 2020 Full Sail University at NXT show. They're a challenge, especially on a card with a Texas death match. The fact that they were able to keep people entertained. There's a huge plethora of history to pull from, but we talked about maybe favorites. We have to really look at this like 6 months removed to see where it stands the test of time.
I love that they're so rare. A lot of times gimmicks get overused, and the Iron Man match is definitely something you pull it out on big shows very rarely, but when it happens, it feels special.
So just to add to the history, and I know I said I was just going to go through some of it, but it is fascinating. I want to put it on here. He said the WWF first used it in 1989 for the Rockers versus the Rougeau brothers house show matches, and they billed it as most falls in an hour, but they shaved tons of time off, and those bouts usually went 35 to 40 minutes. And at the time, they weren't called Iron Man matches. They were called marathon matches. So it's interesting to see. Everyone remembers Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels as the first ever, but clearly it's happened multiple times across different promotions. Same thing with the ladder match. Everyone's like, oh, it was always going to be Shawn and Razor, but Bret and Shawn had their own ladder match years prior. So that's just the WWE brainwashing that they can control the narrative and figure out and tell you what you should believe. But the Iron Man match was born in like the 50s and 60s. That's what the title match were about. And then the 2 out of 3 fall stuff it's always so fascinating to me that you can't lose the title unless you lose 2 out of 3 falls. Like that to me is, that's old school shit, man. I love it.
I love that. And, history is told by the victors, and WWE has been able to tell their version of history for over 20, 30 years. So
for those that hate on Meltzer and don't think he's whatever, he is a historian at heart. So the fact that we can look through these things and put it in the context of what's going on in wrestling today, it's so valuable to sit here and have a conversation about MJF and Bryan Danielson, not just the context of AEW storytelling, but the context of where it sits in history. Because as you mentioned, the Iron Man matches are few and far in between. At this point, it's there's only a few. I mean, the most recent was the Tommaso Ciampa Fatal 4-Way match that I just mentioned before, but there's not many. No. And that's why it's a war of attrition, but it's also a war of keeping people invested. And only the best of the best really should be doing it. And that's a high mentioned badge of honor. It's something that is looked upon as they don't just give it to anyone to do.
And just to piggyback off of your stuff about Meltzer being a historian, he gets a lot of heat, and I've said it before. It's just because of the wrestling fan that has got their knowledge on Meltzer from all of the Conrad Thompson podcasts where people shit on Meltzer. I like Meltzer because of what you said. He's a historian, and it's not just about breaking news that no one knows. Like, it's a good listen, man, because he's giving you historical impact. He has one foot in history. Everything relates back to the history of pro wrestling. If you want to know, kind of dig into that, he's a great guy for that. And he gives good news. He keeps you up to date on the news. It's not always about the the rumor and innuendo and him breaking backstage stuff. I feel like that's what people think he is. And that's like the littlest part of him is breaking that backstage news. I don't even think of Meltzer like that.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think the two things he does really well is bringing history into context and eulogizing wrestlers of the past. I think when, unfortunately, someone passes away and he does that full section of their whole history of their career, those bioptics, as he puts it, like, man, the Jay Briscoe one was fascinating. The Pat Patterson one a few years back, that one sticks out to me. Unfortunately, he's done a lot in the wrestling business. As fans, we've lost a lot of our favorites, but it puts their careers in very good standing, because you can understand the full scope of everything they accomplished. But I agree with you 100%.
You're honestly doing yourself a disservice as a fan if you're just looking at him through the lens of fucking Bruce Pritchard and Eric Bischoff's podcast.
Yeah.
That you really are. Like, you're cheating yourself out of great wrestling knowledge. And I'm not talking about the news right now. I'm talking about the history of this business we love.
So let's talk about the history that is yet to be made. The week ahead, let's preview what's coming on this coming week with wrestling. Raw is already an hour and 20 in, so I'm sure some of it has already happened.
Yeah.
All right, the week ahead of wrestling, let's start with Raw, which I mentioned before is on air. Today is March 6, 2023. John Cena returns. Logan Paul returns to face off with Rollins. Solo Sikoa versus Kevin Owens. Finn Balor versus Johnny Gargano. And we have the Raw Women's Champion Bianca Belair versus Carmella in a non-title match. Of course, what everyone's tuning in for, Mustafa Ali has a surprise for Dolph Ziggler.
Yeah, I got to know what this surprise is.
On SmackDown this Friday, Braun Strowman and Ricochet versus the Viking Raiders. And we have LA Knight versus Kofi Kingston versus Karrion Kross versus Sheamus versus Drew McIntyre to determine the WrestleMania 39 opponent for the WWE Intercontinental Champion Gunther. This has to be Drew McIntyre, right? Or is it going to be Drew McIntyre and Sheamus somehow together?
I'm kind of thinking it's going to be a triple threat between Sheamus, Drew, and Gunther. That'd be fun.
Yeah, hard hitting, and feel bad for everyone's chest on the day after.
Yeah.
NXT Roadblock coming up. We got NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez defending her title against the aforementioned Meiko Satomura. Tony D'Angelo versus Dijak in a jailhouse street fight. Indus Sher and Jinder Mahal versus the Creed Brothers and Braun Breaker. Andre Chase versus Joe Gacy. Gigi Dolan versus JC Jane. Pretty Deadly and Gallus will come face-to-face. The Grayson Waller effect will feature a special guest in Shawn Michaels. And we're going to get the debut of Dragon Lee according to the dirt sheets, but not quite confirmed yet.
Yeah, they're saying Dragon Lee is going to be Shawn Michaels' stand-in to go against Grayson Waller. Let's see how it goes.
On AEW Dynamite, we're going to have the Revolution Fallout, Powerhouse Hobbs versus Wardlow for the TNT Championship. We shall see what happens here. I'm sure other matches will be announced, but we're going to start the build towards Double or Nothing, and hopefully we get a full scope of what's going to be happening. Maybe we'll get MJF's opponent announced, but full reset post Big Four pay-per-view as expected, and I'm definitely excited for it.
That's the Dynamites that I look forward to the most, is where I don't know what they're going to do. There's going to be so much like thrown at us and like, oh shit, we're going this direction. We're going to do this. I'm pumped for this Dynamite.
On Ring of Honor on Thursday, as I mentioned, you guys can hear us break it down on Thursday here, Honor Society. We're going to have the Pure Championship on the line, Wheeler Yuta versus Timothy Thatcher.
Going to be
the
great.
Women's Championship, Athena versus Willow. The TV Championship, Samoa Joe versus Tony Deppen. And then we get Aussie Open versus Tracy Williams and Rhett Titus. And we're going to get Hawk's favorite, Dalton Castle, is going to be in action. So a full stocked action of Ring of Honor Thursday night. You guys can do that in the Honor Club. Seamless thing. I mean, I honestly had no issues watching it. It was great.
Phil, it looks like a great card for their second episode.
On AEW Rampage, nothing announced yet, but of course, Friday night, make sure you guys tune in for that on 10 o'clock. Make sure you guys check it out, whatever they're going to be doing. I'm sure it's going to be great. Impact, we have Knockouts champion Mickie James defending against Giselle Shaw, John Gresham versus Kushida, and then we get Sami Callihan versus Rhino. So some good matches. Again, this is taped, so it takes a little bit of the appeal away, but some good matches to check out here. That's some of the same stuff too with Ring of Honor. That's like the taping takes away because you can go out and read the next 5 weeks of results, which kind of sucks, but you know, It's par for the course.
I get it. It's just you can't let that hurt a young company. It's hard to get a live TV spot, man. These companies aren't AEW and WWE. It takes a lot to make that TV deal where you can watch it live. So it's like the Impact's NWA is doing it live on YouTube, but like it's tough, man. It's tough. So I don't really read the results that much. I try to just dive in and watch the show. I like seeing how a show's laid out. Like I knew the spoilers for ROH, but it's fun to see how they lay the show out to me. That's always a fun watch.
Yeah, and then wrestling's built on taped in bulk shows. I mean, you go back to the old WCW back in the early 90s, late 80s, they were just, they would go to the studio and churn out 35 weeks of content. We're in a different world right now, so Ring of Honor, it's working against them, so you have to go out of your way to avoid spoilers. Like that first week, I knew Zack Sabre Jr. was coming back. I knew Eddie Kingston was there, so it took away from the surprise, but maybe we're going to have less. I know they did 3 weeks worth of content, so maybe after the third week, we'll have a different variation of maybe that's what Jarrett's working on. Maybe we're going to have different events that Ring of Honor is going to be taping their own shows once they get a little bit momentum behind them and TV deals come their way from networks.
Right.
And finally, we have MLW is going to be World Heavyweight Champion Alex Hammerstone defending his championships. Obviously against the Bloodline. This guy is going to be involved in the Bloodline storyline sooner than later, right? I know MLW locked him up.
Yeah. He's feuding with those guys. His big rival is Jacob Fatu. So I love that they need to put Alex Hammerstone and Fatu at the top of the card as much as they can, because those are their two premier guys.
And the Billiton Bulldogs versus the Bomay Fight Club. And then, of course, we get Leo Rush versus the aforementioned Jacob Fatu. So MLW doing big things on Reels. Make sure you check them out if you have the availability and the bandwidth to consume more wrestling. They're worth checking out.
Yeah.
But, dude, that's all we got as far as the week ahead. I mean, this has been a great episode. I know we spent about an hour and change talking about Revolution, but a lot of good stuff to break down. I appreciate everybody's good feedback for the episode last week. I apologize for the Honor Society technical difficulties. Thanks for sticking with us. Hopefully it's the better next week. I'm not sure if Colton will be able to join us. There's been some power outages in his area, so it might just be me solo. It might be me with Freems. It might be whatever. We'll figure it out, but we'll bring you your ROH stuff. And anything else coming up on the tavern you want to hype up, Chad?
I will say tomorrow, this isn't tavern, but it's sister tavern related. Tomorrow, the Broken VCR returns. We've been gone almost 2 months. We've got our own channel on Apple and Spotify. Please go subscribe on Apple and Spotify. And we'll be reviewing the Kung Fu classic King Boxer from 1972, me and Hawk. Flagship show every Thursday. I'm excited for it. Me and Sneed will be talking all about the AEW Dynamite episode, the fallout from Revolution. So it's going to be a fun week. Obviously, Raw down Thursdays, Shot of Nostalgia Fridays. Just go to theturnbuckletavern.com. It'll keep you up to date on all of our shows. But if you want to support the tavern, the best thing you can do, subscribe on YouTube and go subscribe and follow on Apple and Spotify. That'll keep you in our world and you'll know everything that's going on.
Quick showing on my end. Obviously, you mentioned Shot of Nostalgia. Will be covering 3 episodes of Raw this week, building up towards, the spring, summer months of 1998, where things really get popping off. Also going to have a Visits to Tavern Friday night. Zach Ramsey's the miasma from, he's from the Pennsylvania area where he's from Long Island, but he wrestles in the Pennsylvania area as well. So 6'9", 275-pound monster joining me. Talk all about his YouTube miniseries, miasmatheseries.com. He did like a Broken Universe type of series of his character, which was really cool. So stay tuned for that. And also visit my link tree, Cream of the Crop, Remarkable Wrestling. Is going to be April 22nd, Coram, New York. Make sure you guys get your tickets in advance. They just announced a couple matches. Ken Broadway versus Gabriel Sky for the Remarkable Heavyweight Championship. 2 out of 3 falls, 3 out of 3 stages of hell. They already announced the stipulation for that. Also, we're going to get Desmond Cole versus Kona Capuccia. And just shout out to them. They just had their year anniversary, celebrating 1 year as a promotion. So very excited to be a part of what they're doing. I just appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the magic that they create on a monthly basis there.
Support indie wrestling, man. Go watch the shows. We'll be just a little teaser. Our guest for the debate this week is a indie promoter we're friends with. So they will be guesting this week on the debate. Derek from Pro Wrestling Conquest. They've got a big show coming up in March. So yeah, go support indie wrestling.
And that's all we got, Chad. So, I mean, I guess we could just tell everybody what they should do. Obviously keep it strong and stiff, right?
Yeah, you got to keep it snug and stiff. And guys, tune in next week. We'll have more news for you. See you then.
Reach for the sky, boy.